Chapter 155. Thinking of this, the two brothers gritted their teeth in hatred. Xie Chang Chao swung his arm. That day when Xie Jingxing stepped on his shoulder, there was still a dull pain. He said, "Second older brother, one heard that Shin Xian and wife entered the palace today. This time they have achieved military merits, one fear that His Majesty will reward Shin Qiu." The Shin and Xie families were in deep discord. Xie Changwu and Xie Chang Chao did not view Shin Qiu as a thorn in their eyes because of the Shen and Xie families' political stance. In fact, they viewed all the youths in the capital as their opponents. And Shin Qiu was undoubtedly the most outstanding among those youths. Even though Xie Jingxing was also outstanding, Xie Jingxing did not become an official, and with Xie Ding's protection, they could do nothing even if they wanted to. But Shin Qiu was different. If Xie Changwu and Xie Chang Chao were to become an official, one feared that everyone would compare the two brothers with the D sons of the first household of the Shin family. And what Xie Changwu and Xie Chang Chao hated the most was to be inferior to others. "What are you afraid of?" Xie Changwu said in disdain, "Only a martial artist who only knows how to fight and kill, and does not know anything about the matters of the court. In the Shin family, other than Shin Xian's military merits, what can Shin Xian do? Now the Shin family is also an arrow at the end of its flight. It looks good, but in the end." He suddenly stopped and did not continue speaking. "Second older brother is right." Xie Chang Chao smiled, who asked the Shin family to be a neutral party. "In this world, it is only a dream to want to be virtuous. But many thanks to the Shin family's stupidity, at least in the future, we will have one less opponent." If the conversation between the two of them was known by others, one feared that they would be shocked. After all, Xie Changwu and Xie Chang Chao had a noble appearance on the outside, and the Xie family did not participate in the fight for the heir apparent position. But just now Xie Changwu and Xie Chang Chao's words hinted that they had gone behind the Xie family's back to a certain faction. Speaking of which, the Shin family is not to be feared as we still have one in our own family. Xie Chang Chao suddenly turned to another direction. That direction was the courtyard where Princess Yuqing was recuperating, and it was also the courtyard where Xie Jingxing was currently staying. He thought of Xie Jingxing pointing the spear at his head during the academy examinations, and a gloomy feeling rose in his chest. After a while, he said, "That bastard is getting more and more arrogant." He actually called Xie Jingxing a scoundrel in private, and if they met on normal days, he would be very respectful, which really made one speechless. "That's right." Xie Chang Chao followed Xie Changwu's words and said, "These days he is more well-behaved and father values him more. Could it be that there's an expert guiding him? Is there some kind of conspiracy?" Xie Jingxing had been stubborn for so many years and did not enter officialdom. Even though it was a headache, it made the two Xie brothers secretly relieved. But even so, when people mentioned the young Marquis Xie, other than being cynical, they were full of praise for his heroic bearing on the battlefield. Not only that, no matter how Xie Jingxing opposed Xie Ding treated Xie Jingxing wholeheartedly. Instead, his attitude towards his two filial sons was lukewarm. As a result, the jealousy towards Xie Jingxing seemed to grow more and more intense over the past 10 years. In the past, as long as Xie Jingxing was in the Ding capital, something big would happen every 3 to 5 days, but ever since the academy examinations incident, he seemed to have changed his temperament and lived in seclusion every day, not knowing what he was busy with. But this kind of uncharacteristic quietness made Xie Ding very gratified, and even felt that Xie Jingxing had finally put away his stubbornness and was going to do serious things. Because of this, Xie Chang Chao and Xie Changwu were even more nervous. "Who cares what expert guide him?" Xie Changwu sneered, "There will be a day when he will be stepped on by my feet." At the beginning that woman was a princess and did not end up well, much less a son. Chapter 156. In short, it is better to build a close relationship with His Highness Prince Ding during the returning banquet. Xie Chang Chao said before raising his spear and fiercely pierced it into the haystack in front of him. And at this time the main character of the two people's discussion was sitting at the table in the room. The courtyard where Princess Yuqing was recuperating was filled with flowers and plants, and some trees were still lush even in winter. In front of Xie Jingxing's room, the branches and leaves of the trees almost blocked the entire window. Even if it was daytime, the room always looked gloomy. However, amidst the gloomy atmosphere, the young man's eyes were as bright as the sun. The guard in front of him handed him a letter. He read it carefully and threw it into the warm stove in the room. In an instant, ashes flew out and the letter disappeared without a trace. What do you mean? A figure came from behind. The white-clad gentleman was leisurely pouring tea for himself. His posture was elegant, as if he was really tasting tea with someone. The situation has changed. Xie Jingxing did not turn back and seemed to be thinking about something. Oh. The white-clad gentleman paused and frowned as he looked at him. Was it not long ago, Gao Yang? Xie Jingxing suddenly said, how about breaking before establishing, dying before settling? You are not this kind of character. Gao Yang was surprised for a moment before shaking his head. Don't you always like to hide your strength and bide your time, and only take action when everything is fixed? If the result is not to win and not do anything, it would surprise me that you, who is used to planning, would say it like this. He asked, did you encounter something? Met a lunatic. Xie Jingxing raised his brows, made me suddenly feel that it is not bad to gamble. He stood up. The purple robes were embroidered with gold cloud patterns. If one did not look carefully, one would not be able to see it, but in the dim light, there was a faint bright brilliance. Could it be that you are talking about the D daughter of the Shen family? Gao Yang hit the nail on the head. I have heard from Tai Yi about that day's matter. Even though it was bold, it was too reckless. Now that Shen Xian has returned, one fear that with Shen Xian's character, he would make a big fuss. The thing is not in the Shen family. Xie Jingxing said, I have changed my mind. Not planning to use the Shen family. Gao Yang was somewhat surprised. There are too many variables in the Shen family. Xie Jingxing shook his head. The youth's handsome brows lost the usual frivolity and showed a calmness beyond his age. His natural elegance and nobility gave him a layer of mysterious luster that was even more dazzling than the blazing sun in the sky. What do you mean by variable? Gao Yang asked. Xie Jingxing's lips hooked up. Towards the Fu family's attitude, I have a premonition that in the future structure of Ming Qi, the Shen family will become the biggest variable. Gao Yang seemed to be in slight disbelief. However, his trust in the youth ultimately won over the doubt in his heart. He said, how do you know? On what basis did the Shen family become a variable? Shen Qiu. Shen Xen. Even if there is a problem within the Shen family, it does not represent the entire Shen family's attitude. There is a smart person in the Shen family. Xie Jingxing said lazily, but fate is too cruel. What is the use of struggling? He said, in short, there is a change in the plan. Change the method. You can't be thinking. Gao Yang was moved. For so many years, I have endured for too long. Xie Jingxing said, because of concerns, one could endure, but now. He smiled. It was as if the dark clouds had suddenly retreated and the sunlight poured into the room. In a moment, the beautiful scenery lost its color and there was no light. Xie Jingxing stood with his hands behind his back and lightly said, Gao Yang, I am tired of lying low. I will take action in the shortest time possible. But are you willing? Gao Yang asked. There is nothing to be unwilling about. Gao Yang sighed, and when he raised his head again, it had become firm. Since that is the case, then do as you say. Temporarily hide it from that side and we will start from Ming Qi's side. In the Fu family, who do you think we should start from? Old rules. Throw a ball and whoever catches it first, it will be that person. He smiled lightly. But his fingers touched something in his sleeves and his heart moved. His fingertips took out a delicate little bottle. That was the medicine bottle that Gao Yang gave him. In the medicine bottle was what Gao Yang called a priceless medicine that was specially used to treat scars. Gao Yang said that with this plaster, no matter how deep the scar was, it would fade away cleanly. He held the medicine bottle in his fist, and when he released his palm, the delicate little bottle had already turned into powder. Just like what Shen Miao did, a big fire would burn away all the false balance and expose the ferocious truth, which was the real pattern to take action. Shen Miao used her own scars to eliminate the possibility of reconciliation in the future. Then what about him? His gaze lightly swept out of the window to the dark skies of the residence of the Marquis of Lineage. After so many years, he had seen it too many times. Because of the warmth in his memories, he was also willing to maintain the false balance. Now it was time to break this balance. He closed his eyes, and his long eyelashes were as beautiful as the wings of a butterfly in spring, but when he opened his eyes, his gaze was sharper than the sharpest knife. In front of his table, there was a map that was spread out. That map was not anything else, but looking at it seriously, it was the map of Ming Qi's territory. From the 13 capitals of Yuzhou to the northern desert Ding Yuan City, from Jiang Nanzhou province to Ding Shi's eastern sea, from the ancient city of Linan to the ancient city of Luoyang, in the center of the territory was the most flourishing Ding capital. The mountains and rivers were turbulent, and the heroes of the world came forth in large numbers. He stretched out his hand and gently wiped the center of the territory map with his finger, as if it was deciding the rise and fall of a dynasty. Chapter 157. Shen Xian and wife finally returned to the residence in the evening. Accompanying them back to the mansion was a carriage full of rewards from the palace. If it was in the past, these rewards would definitely have been confiscated. But today, Luo Shuayan had the servants carry the chests directly into the west courtyard. The rewards from the palace were either rich or expensive. The servants in the eastern courtyard could only watch as the boxes passed by their courtyard, and from time to time, there were sounds of things breaking in Rongjing Tang. It was obvious that old Shen Furen, who had taken advantage of the situation, was furious and was throwing a tantrum for others to see. But those who came out from the military would not be affected by such a tantrum. The boxes were still being moved and were extremely efficient as they were quickly moved. Shen Miao was sitting at the table reading. She was reading about Ming Qi's politics and laws. Previously, when Gu Yu and the rest found her poems and songs, she just threw them to one side and did not even take a look. She only heard a hearty laughter coming from outside the door, jiao jiao. Shen Miao turned her head and saw Shen Xian striding in from the door with Luo Shuayan following behind. Most likely they had just returned to the residence and rushed over, as they did not even change their clothes. Shen Qiu walked at the back and made a face at her. Shen Miao stood up and bowed to them, father, mother, eldest brother. Her gentle appearance made Shen Xian and wife startled for a moment. Shen Miao was not close to them, and in the past when she came back, she would leave after saying a few words and was extremely impatient. This kind of amiable appearance had not been seen for a long time. However, in that gentleness, there seemed to be a trace of alienation. This kind of alienation was very slight, but as parents, Shen Xian and Luo Shuayan were still sensitive to it. Shen Miao sighed slightly in her heart. She was unable to act like a real 14-year-old girl and act coquettishly with Shen Xian, and it was even more impossible to pretend that nothing had happened. In the previous life, she was the one who dragged down the Shen family, and when facing Shen Xian and Luo Shuayan, there was only a strong sense of guilt in her heart. Luo Shuayan's heart only paused for a moment, and her concern for her daughter quickly overshadowed that bit of doubt. She took a few steps forward and grabbed Shen Miao's hand and asked anxiously, "How is Jiao Jiao's body? Do you feel that anything is wrong?" "I'm fine," Shen Miao replied with a smile. "Jiao Jiao, father obtained several large chests of treasures from the palace today. When your body is better, tomorrow morning you can go and pick what you like." Those jewelry and hairpins, one heard that they are the first in the Ding capital. Shin Xian's words were somewhat flattering. Such a big and burly man carefully trying to please his daughter made one feel that it was somewhat comical. Shin Miao smiled faintly, "Thank you, father, but this is not urgent. Just lock those treasures in the storeroom of our courtyard. After a long time, when I think of the day that I am interested, I will go pick them out." As soon as he said this, the expressions of the people in the room changed. In the past at this time, when Shin Xian carried the chests back, naturally he would let Shin Miao choose first and the rest would be sent to the public. He had always doted on his daughter like this and no one refuted his words because these rewards were obtained by Shin Xian with real swords and spears. But if it was in the past, Shin Miao would definitely not pick first and would let Shin Yu and Shin Qing finish picking first. After the second and third household picked, she would then start to pick. Naturally it was because she was close to the second and third household that she would do so. But today, not only did Shin Miao not decline, she even suggested to lock the chests in the storeroom of her own courtyard. Even though Shin Xian did not intend to confiscate the rewards this time, but the change in Shin Miao's attitude towards the rest of the Shin family was clearly seen by everyone. Chapter 158. Even if they did not understand the matters of the inner courtyard, they could see that something was wrong with Shin Miao. Shin Qiu opened his mouth but Luo Shuayan held Shin Miao's hands and softly said, "Jiao Jiao, tell mother what happened. Father and mother are back and no one would dare to bully you in the future." "No one dares to bully me." Shin Miao smiled, "Nothing happened to me." "What exactly happened on that day when the ancestral hall caught fire?" Shin Xian asked in a deep voice, "Why did you stay in the ancestral hall alone?" Both husband and wife entered the palace early in the morning to meet the emperor and only left people to investigate in secret, but there was no time to investigate the strangeness. "I made a mistake and was locked in the ancestral hall." "Who knew that the ancestral hall suddenly caught fire?" she said awkwardly. When Shin Qiu who was behind saw this, he wanted to say something but stopped. He knew what was going on but Shin Miao repeatedly told him not to tell the matter to Shin Xian and wife. Even though he wanted to tell his father and mother the truth, Shin Miao said that if Shin Qiu did not keep the secret, she would no longer care about Shin Qiu, so he dispelled this idea. Shin Xian indeed asked Shin Miao, "What mistake did you make? Even if it was a big mistake, you should not be locked in the ancestral hall alone." "Oh." Shin Miao played it down, "I contradicted second Shu in front of Zhu Mu and others." "What?" Luo Shuayan's eyebrows were raised but she did not reprimand Shin Miao but said, "Number 2 is really getting older and older. A grown man arguing with a young female. Do you not have any face?" Gu Yu and Jing Zhe who were serving in the room twitched their lips. The first household of the Shin family were the most protective and it was indeed not nonsense. Even if Shin Miao hit Shin Gui, one feared that Shin Xian and wife would blame Shin Gui for making Shin Miao's hands sore. "Younger sister, why did you contradict second Shu?" Shin Qiu could not help but ask. "Most likely it is because I am not willing to marry," Shin Miao said. "Marry?" Luo Shuayan and Shin Xian exclaimed at the same time. Luo Shuayan looked at Shin Miao and asked anxiously, "Marry what person? How come your father and I do not know?" Shin Miao lowered her head. The assistant minister of the legislative bureau's Wei family proposed marriage for their son, Wei Qian, and even exchanged the Gung invitation, but I am not willing to marry, so I contradicted in public. Wei Qian. Shin Xian pondered for a moment. The Wei family is a large family and the son of the Wei family seems to be a young outstanding talent. If one were to talk about it, it would be similar to Jiao Jiao. He was actually seriously looking at this marriage again. Shin Xian had been an official for so many years and even though he was not in the Ding capital, he had a good understanding of his colleagues in the officialdom. If the Wei family was some prodigal son, he would naturally be able to tell at a glance, but Wei Qian was a rare son-in-law. Shin Xian thought of other things for a moment. "What are you thinking about?" Luo Shuiyan roared, he is the heavenly king, even if he is the emperor, Jiao Jiao can't refuse. Luo Shuiyan's words were shocking. She was a valiant female born from a military family in the northwest, and her marriage with Shen Xian was fought for by herself. Thus Luo Shuiyan could not bear to see all the arranged matchmaking words of parents. She said, moreover, both of us do not know about this matter, so who knows what kind of intentions they have. Ever since she saw Shen Miao trapped in the sea of fire and Ren Wanyun and the rest were calm and composed, Luo Shuiyan was filled with disgust towards the rest of the Shen family, and her previous good impression was swept away. Shen Xian also frowned. It was reasonable to say that the Wei family had such a good marriage, and if it was arranged to Shen Miao, it would not be considered a loss. After all, it was rare to pick out such a good young outstanding talent in the Ding capital. But since it was such a good marriage, why did the Shen family hide it from them husband and wife? Shen Qiu's lips curled up. He knew what was going on and was also somewhat resentful that Shen Miao did not tell the rest of the Shen family about the idea of exchanging the marriage. However, he could only remain silent. He did not know why, but every time Shen Miao's gaze swept over to him, there was a kind of deterrent force. Shen Qiu himself was not willing to believe that he, who was invincible in the battlefield, would actually be afraid of his own younger sister. Chapter 159. But Jiao Jiao, Shen Xian spoke softly, the eldest son of the Wei family is not bad. For you to be so resistant, is it because there is already a male that you admire? You. He wanted to speak but stopped. In the letters that the Shen family sent, there were frequent reports of Shen Miao being infatuated with Prince Ding. In this world, if Shen Miao liked any male, he and Luo Shuiyan would not obstruct, but the Tian family was different. Now that it was the time for the princes to fight for the throne, if the Shen family were to get involved, one feared that they would be dragged into the quagmire. But these matters, Shen Miao, this kind of young lady, would not understand. On the way back, Shen Xian and Luo Shuiyan had discussed numerous times on how to persuade Shen Miao to dispel this idea, but at the end they were helpless. Shen Miao had a stubborn temperament, and once she had decided on something, even 9 bulls would not be able to pull her back. Moreover, to tell a young lady to give up her sweetheart, if it was another person, one feared that they would not be able to accept it. With one look, Shen Miao knew what Shen Xian wanted to say and said lightly, there is no one in my heart, and the reason why I am not willing to marry was because I heard that the young master of the Wei family already has someone in his heart. No matter how good he is, he already has moonlight in his heart. Why should I be the one who breaks up the affectionate couple and make him lose his life for nothing? Her words made Shen Xian and wife somewhat dizzy. How could Shen Miao say such mature words? It was as if she was a married woman who had seen thousands of ships. Secondly, what did she say about not having anyone in her heart? Shen Miao only gradually understood Wei Qian after she became the Empress in her previous lifetime. In the past lifetime, there was no mention of the Wei family coming up to propose marriage, as Wei Qian also married his own Biao younger sister. As a rare young talent in the Ding capital, Wei Qian doted on his wife, and at that time there was a good story about it. From this, it could be deduced that Wei Qian and Biao Mei were childhood sweethearts. It was likely that when the Wei family came to propose marriage, that young Master Wei would not be willing. Jiao Jiao, don't you like His Highness Prince Ding? Luo Shuiyan gritted her teeth and asked. Prince Ding. When Shen Miao heard it, she said lightly, His Highness Prince Ding is a descendant of the heavens, how can I climb up to him? Back then, I didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Now that I've calmed down, I realize that I've gone too far. I don't dare to mention this matter anymore. Luo Shuiyan was surprised for a moment. Shen Xian and Shen Qiu were after all males, and it was all right if they did not understand. Even though she had a carefree temperament, she was still a female. Females understood the feelings in a female's heart the best. She thought that Shen Miao was only saying it, but after carefully looking at Shen Miao's expression, she discovered that when Prince Ding was mentioned, Shen Miao did not have any trace of change in expression, as if she was talking about a stranger. Not waiting for Luo Shuiyan to speak, Shen Xian himself cried out first, Jiao Jiao, father does not agree with your words. No matter who our Shen family matches, you are able to climb up. Which disciple of Ming Qi would dare to despise you, even if... Cough. Luo Shuiyan coughed lightly and glared fiercely at Shen Xian. It was all right for Shen Xian to praise his daughter, but it was not easy for Shen Miao to dispel the thoughts of Prince Ding. Wasn't Shen Xian creating trouble for himself? Shen Xian also knew that he had said the wrong thing, so he quickly looked away as if nothing had happened. Luo Shuiyan looked at Shen Miao again, and when she saw her calm expression, she was relieved and smiled. Jiao Jiao is still young and there is no rush to marry. There are so many good males in Ming Qi and our Jiao Jiao is outstanding, so would there be any fear of not being able to find a good husband? Rest assured, our Jiao Jiao's husband would definitely be an indomitable hero. Shen Miao's eyes drooped down as she smiled and did not say anything. Her fantasies of the person beside her had long been wiped clean after being disheartened time and time again in the inner palace in her previous life. In this lifetime, she had long decided not to marry, but these words could not be known by Shen Xian and wife. Ordinary females would always be a little shy when they heard about their own marriage. Moreover, in the eyes of the husband and wife, Shen Miao was not a cold and hard person. But after Luo Shuiyan's words, they did not see any reaction from Shen Miao, and both of them could not help but feel somewhat depressed. Even though Shen Miao was not close to them in the past, they still understood Shen Miao's temperament. Now that she returned, Shen Miao had become more and more unfamiliar. In one night, she had matured so much that Shen Xian and wife did not know how to treat their daughter. If they were to coax and persuade like before, they would look like fools when facing Shen Miao's calm eyes. Chapter 160. When Shen Qiu saw the embarrassment of his parents, he laughed out loud. Shen Xian and his wife were feared on the battlefield, but in front of his younger sister, they were at a loss. But Shen Qiu's gaze gradually darkened. A person's temperament would not change so much overnight. Something must have happened for a proud and willful little girl to become so calm and steady. Father. Shen Miao suddenly spoke, after a few days, the palace will hold a returning banquet. The returning banquet was for the Shen family's army to defeat the enemy, and the emperor held a banquet to reward them according to their merits. All the civil and military officials had to bring their families to attend, and it was considered a banquet for the officials of the royal family who were closer to them. At the returning banquet, the emperor would reward the meritorious officials according to their contributions. In the previous life, during the returning banquet a few days later, the emperor wanted to promote Shen Qiu's official position, but because of Shen Miao's matter, Shen Xian put up a whole body of meritorious services and got the emperor to agree to the marriage bestowal and obtained the title of Ding Wangfei from Shen Miao. A woman asking for a man's hand in marriage was something that was out of line. Shen Xian had dominated his entire life on the battlefield, but at the last moment, he did not hesitate to use his merits to beg for his daughter and almost ended up being the laughing stock of the entire court. At that time, Shen Miao was only happy to become Ding Wangfei and did not see Shen Xian's bitter smile. From the moment she married into the residence of Prince Ding, it meant that the Shen family was tied onto Prince Ding's boat, and Fu Xiuyi had an honorable reason to squeeze the last bit of value out of the Shen family army. Yes. Shen Xian smiled and asked, is there something that Jiao Jiao wants? Father can help you ask His Majesty for it. This level of pampering was like a pearl in the palm. Shen Miao's mouth was somewhat dry. Why did she not discover her father's feelings for her in her previous life? Although the destruction of the Shen family was driven by the enemy, it was also because of her stubbornness and blindness. I don't have anything I want. Shen Miao smiled gently, but if His Majesty wants to reward father. She paused, and when she raised her head again, her eyes were clear and bright. She said, Father can request from His Majesty to stay in the capital for half a year and accompany me. What do you think? When these words were spoken, Luo Shuiyan, Shen Xian and Shen Qiu were all startled. Shen Miao would never ask them to stay because they were not by their side since they were young and their feelings were not close, so naturally they would not be reluctant. Every year after the end of the year, Shen Xian and wife would leave the capital to defend the northwest region. Even if there were no enemy troops, they had to guard their territory to prevent foreign enemies from invading. Actually, there was no need for this, but the emperor still personally appointed him every year. In addition, when the old general was alive, he also had this habit, so he never refuted it. But Shen Miao was clearly asking them to stay. She was urging Shen Xian and wife to stay and let them set off half a year later. This was somewhat out of line, but in Shen Xian and wife's ears, they were wild with joy, as at least this meant that Shen Miao did not treat them without any feelings. Of course. Delighted by the change in his daughter's attitude, Shen Xian agreed without even thinking clearly about the problem. Luo Shuiyan was also somewhat excited. Shen Qiu, who was at the side, curled his lips. He did not want to stay in the Ding capital. To him, there was really nothing interesting in the Ding capital. Those noble family's disciples were not interested, so it would be better to let him fight in the northwest desert. But looking at Shen Miao's face, his heart softened. At least with him by her side, it was good that no one in the Ding capital dared to bully Shen Miao. After speaking a few more words, Shen Xian and wife left with Shen Qiu. After they left, Shen Miao closed the scroll on the table and walked to the window. Young lady. Guyu softly said. Chun Tao had already informed that eldest young lady's stomach is fine. One heard that second Furen and second master are quarreling about eldest young lady's marriage. Chapter 161. Shen Miao smiled coldly. Ren Yun's good plan of marrying the sisters had already gone down the drain with Shen Xian's return to the residence. If Shen Qing was to be married to Huang Dexing, naturally Ren Yun would not be willing. But the Gung invitation had already been exchanged and both families had already agreed on it. It was not an easy thing to go back on one's words at this time. Lifting a rock to smash one's own feet, this was the logic. Of course, Ren Yun's idea fell through and she would not let her have an easy time. The poisonous snake wanted to counterattack, but in a few days' time at the returning banquet, she also wanted to catch Ren Yun's weak point in front of everyone and catch Prince Yu unprepared. Outside the door, Luo Shuiyan's and Shen Xian's face sunk. Luo Shuiyan said angrily, "What is the matter with old Tai Tai and your few younger brothers? Arranging Jiao Jiao's marriage for no rhyme or reason. This is the first time I heard of such logic in my life. Furen need not be angry." Shen Xian said, "I will immediately go and find old Tai Tai to clarify. Once there is such matter, I will immediately explain it to the Wei family. To hide it like this, one fear that there is something fishy. I guess that Jiao Jiao had suffered a lot in this year." Luo Shuiyan said unhappily, "Later I will call Jiao Jiao and the few maids over to ask clearly what happened. Gue Momo is also missing. After all, she was a person who had been on the battlefield and would have a certain sensitivity towards these things." She said, "I see that what Jiao Jiao said is not wrong. Staying in the Ding capital for half a year, if these monsters are not sorted out clearly, one fear that daughter's life would be gone." As she spoke, she glared at Shen Xian. Shen Xian touched his nose and naturally knew that Luo Shuiyan was dissatisfied with his two brothers. Not to mention Luo Shuiyan, he himself was also full of anger. He instructed the two guards beside him, "Guard young lady well these few days. If there is anything wrong, immediately inform me. If young lady has any mishap, you will be punished according to military law." Finishing, he looked at Shen Qiu and frowned, "Brat, why are you in a daze?" Shen Qiu only recovered from Shen Xian's roar and said vaguely, "Oh, I was thinking about something and was distracted." He had been thinking about Shen Miao's matter. The people who were sent to Wulong Temple today had already returned with news. They did not discover anything wrong. No one discovered what happened that day. Shen Qiu was not a fool and naturally knew that this was because all the insiders had been sent away. To be able to do this without a trace, it did not seem to be the Shin family's style. Hiding the truth from Shin Miao made Shin Qiu even more suspicious. Unknowingly, his younger sister was becoming more and more unfathomable. Look at the time. Shin Xian vented the anger from Furen onto his unfortunate son. Go and investigate the matters in the residence. I will come and ask you tomorrow. Ah. Shin Qiu agreed with a bitter face. He did know the ins and outs of the matter, but his younger sister did not allow him to say it. The Kai Yun court was in a complete mess. When Shin Gui left, he quarreled with Ren Wanyun. Ever since the day Shin Xian returned from old Shin Furen's birthday banquet, Shin Gui had a conflict with Ren Wanyun because of this matter. In fact, Shin Gui also knew that Ren Wanyun was grounded, but to him, once something happened, he would naturally push all the blame onto Ren Wanyun. The reason why he and Shin Wan were able to reach this stage today was all because of the connections that Shin Xian left behind. Even though they had a certain status in the court, but if Shin Xian had the intention to do something bad to them, Shin Gui's and Shin Wan's careers would be in a mess. This was a world where martial arts were respected. Even though the civil officials ridiculed the military generals as unbearably crude, but whoever had the military power would be more important in Ming-Chi. Between the civil officials and the military generals, the emperor would naturally protect the military generals. Previously the two brothers were watertight in front of Shin Xian, and Shin Xian was also happy to take care of them, but who knew that this time Shin Xian would personally see Shin Miao in a sea of fire. Shin Xian saw Shin Miao as his life, and Shin Gui was flustered at what he would do in anger. Ever since Shin Xian returned, Shin Gui was extremely irritated and Ren Wanyun had to mention breaking off the marriage at this time. It was like adding oil to the fire, and all the dissatisfaction towards Ren Wanyun broke out. Chapter 162. Today was the same. He angrily quarreled with Ren Wanyun, and after leaving the sentence that Shin Qing must marry into the Huang family, Shin Gui brushed his sleeves and left Ren Wanyun, who was so angry that she almost fainted. Bastard! Bastard! Ren Wanyun touched her chest and her lips were trembling. Shin Gui did not care about his daughter's happiness and wholeheartedly wanted to climb into the Huang family to add bricks and tiles to his career, making Ren Wanyun so angry that she was in a complete mess. Now that Shin Xian had returned and Luo Shuiyan was not an easy person to get along with. If it was not that the matter was extremely confidential and if Shin Xian and wife knew that she had the idea of exchanging sisters' marriage, one feared that they would have the heart to kill her. Even if Shin Xian and wife were not able to discover it this time, the fire in the ancestral hall would leave an estrangement in the first household and it would be difficult to take action against Shin Miao in the future. Ren Wanyun hated that she could not hack Shin Miao into 1,000 pieces. At the beginning it was Shin Miao who schemed against Shin Qing, and if it was not for Shin Miao, how would Shin Qing end up marrying a cut sleeve? Now that Shin Miao had Shin Xian's protection, it would not be easy to play tricks on the marriage. Furen, calm down. Xiang Lan said as she soothed Ren Wanyun, do not let anger harm your health. It is the returning banquet in a few days, and if you are angered badly, then you cannot go out. Ren Wanyun's eyes moved and a sinister smile appeared on her face. You are right. I cannot let anger harm my health. Returning banquet. Returning banquet, I want that little slut to live a life worse than death. She turned her head to look at Kaiju. Has the letter that was sent to Prince Yu residence arrived? It has already been sent. Kaiju said carefully. Since my Qing'e will not end well, then that little slut should not think of escaping. A sneer appeared on Ren Wanyun's face. I cannot do anything to her as Shin Xian is protecting her. If they have the ability, then they will go against Prince Yu residence. Her appearance was like a vicious snake that spat out its tongue. There will be someone who can tidy her up. Prince Yu residence. In the magnificent main hall, there were beautiful Persian dancers wearing thin clothes dancing. Their snow-white bare feet stepped on the soft carpet and there were colorful bells tied around their ankles that made a melodious sound as they danced. Her snake-like waist danced nimbly. The middle-aged man on the high seat had an ugly and ferocious face and his left leg was empty. It was Prince Yu. At the moment there was a petite young female kneeling under him. The young female was about 11 or 12 years old and was still very young. She had delicate features but her eyes were filled with fear. At the moment she was not wearing anything and was gently massaging Prince Yu's legs. This young girl's snow-white body was covered with purple and green bruises. Upon closer inspection, there were even red whip marks. Clearly, she had experienced an extraordinary amount of pain and torture. Prince Yu of the first rank looked at the letter in his hands and suddenly smiled before slapping the lion head on his seat. His action caused the girl to scream in fear. She fell to the ground and couldn't help but shiver. Shen Xin. Prince Yu's mouth slowly chewed on a few words, Shen Miao. Dare to fool this prince. After that night's matter, because he found other interesting things, he threw the matter to the back of his mind. To Prince Yu, these young females were just amusing toys, like those cats and dogs. As for what would happen in the future, he did not care at all. In addition with Shen Gui's concealment, he did not find anything wrong. It was only until this letter came that he finally remembered that something was wrong that day. That Shen Miao had such good means, at the same time as she counterattacked Ren Wanyun, she also played with him. In Ming-Chi, even if Prince Yu was a member of the imperial family, other than the emperor, everyone had to be courteous to him. Shen Miao was just a little female and dared to step on his dignity. If it was previously he only had some interest in playing with Shen Miao, this time Prince Yu was really angry and had the intention to kill. It was just that Shen Xian was still protecting in the Ding capital, so how could he make a move? Or perhaps he could also settle Shen Xian at the same time. Prince Yu touched his chin and a trace of ruthlessness flashed in his eyes. Chapter 163. 3 days later, the royal family held a banquet to return to the capital. All the civil and military officials brought their families to attend. Even though it was said that the ruler and officials were celebrating together, everyone was well aware that this returning banquet was only the emperor's celebration banquet for Shen Xian. The Shen family held great power in their hands and also had fierce generals like Shen Xian and Shen Qiu. If used well, it would be a good knife to protect Ming-Chi. If used improperly, it could threaten the person sitting on the chair at any time. Towards the Shen family, the imperial family of Ming-Chi was both reliant and guarded against them, but in front of them, the Shen family was at least safe when the foreign lands had not been purged. As long as the Shen family did not recklessly wade into the muddy waters of the fight for the heir apparent, the imperial family would not take any action against the Shen family within 10 years. This was something that anyone in the court with a brain could see. But previously Shen Miao was infatuated with Prince Ding, causing others to think that if Shen Xian were to marry his daughter to Fu Xiu-yi, the Shen family's position in court would become subtle. But afterwards it seemed that Shen Miao's interest in Fu Xiu-yi gradually faded and the Shen family did not need to be involved in the storm of the fight for the heir apparent, so naturally they would be safe and sound. In the next 10 years, the name of the formidable great general in the Ding capital would be able to awe many people. Early in the morning, Luo Shuiyan came over to see Shen Miao. In these few days, Luo Shuiyan and Shen Xian were investigating the matters that happened in the past year in the Shen residence, but those matters were covered up very well and were all insignificant small matters, thus nothing could be found out. But even so, Shen Xian and wife still felt that it was strange. These days, their attitude towards old Shen Furen and the other two households was a lot more distant. Shen Miao did not tell Shen Xian and wife about Shen Qing losing her innocence, thus it was even more impossible for Ren Wanyun and Chen Roqiu to take the initiative to say it. Thus Gui Momo's death was casually found as an excuse, saying that her hands and feet were not clean and thus she was expelled from the Shen residence. Ren Wanyun initially thought that Shen Miao would tell the truth, but who knew that Shen Miao would follow her excuse? Ren Wanyun was sure that Shen Miao did not complain to Shen Xian and wife because of some concerns, thus she became even more fearless. Miss, there are too few hairpins in your box. Bai Lu combed Shen Miao's hair into a long bun. Now that Shen Miao was thinner, she gradually had the style of a young female, thus it would be inappropriate to dress up like in the past. Moreover, they were entering the palace today, so it was better to dress respectfully and appropriately. But in the past Shen Miao's jewelry were all handled by Ren Wanyun, and most of them were gold and silver jewelry, and those jewelry were all spent when Shen Miao bought Yan Mei Shui Bai from San Fu Ban, as well as helping Imo Qing to bribe physician Chen. Now, the jewelry box was empty. Didn't Master bring back His Majesty's reward yesterday? Shuang Jiang suddenly had an idea. Why not let young lady pick from those? There are definitely many good things bestowed by the palace. Forget it. Shen Miao flatly refused. Those things in the palace, which one was not stained with blood? Now she did not want to wear those things on her body at all, as if it was stained with blood, it would remind her of those tragic years. She thought for a moment, then opened a hidden compartment in the jewelry box and picked out a hairpin. Oh, this hairpin is so beautiful. Bai Lu was pleasantly surprised. When did young lady have such a hairpin? Was it given by Furen? Shen Miao picked up the hairpin and looked at it carefully. This was the real begonia that Xie Jingxing had used in the academy examinations in the plum blossom forest to exchange for the begonia that she wore on her head. If it was not for Bai Lu mentioning about no jewelry today, she would have thrown this thing to the back of her mind. The entire body of the hairpin was made of jade, from light to dark, until it reached the part of the flower. The entire piece of jade was a sparkling purplish-red color. The craftsman who carved it was also skillful. The begonia petals were in full bloom and there was a sense of prosperity. It was cold and moist to the touch, obviously it was a top-quality jade material. One feared that this begonia hairpin was worth more than 1,000 gold. In the previous lifetime, Shen Miao had seen a lot of good things in the palace, so naturally she could see that this hairpin was extraordinary. Because of this, she was even more surprised with Xie Jingxing. No matter how rich the residence of the Marquis of Linan was, it would not be able to withstand such extravagance. Chapter 164. Seeing Shen Miao in a daze, Bai Lu was afraid of delaying time and reminded, "Young lady, this hairpin looks good. This servant will help you put it on." Shen Miao then recovered to her senses and followed Bai Lu's intention. At the end, Shuang Jiang helped her put some rouge on her cheeks before it was considered over. Guyu held up a lotus green rabbit fur cloak and draped it over her before smiling. "Young lady is really good looking. Furen will definitely like it when she sees it." Outside the door, Luo Shuiyan and Shen Xian were waiting outside. Shen Qiu pulled off a piece of leaf and said, "Why does mother not let younger sister go to the bestowed box to find clothes and jewelry to wear? This will save a lot of trouble." "What do you know?" Luo Shuiyan said in a bad mood. Since the bestowment of materials, when would one see ready-made clothes? Even if there were ready-made clothes, who knows if it was worn by an imperial concubine? I dare not let Jiao Jiao wear it. As for jewelry, forget about it. Jiao Jiao can wear whatever she likes and it is better not to interfere. Shen Miao had always liked tacky clothes and this point was a headache for Luo Shuiyan. No matter how Luo Shuiyan persuaded, Shen Miao was unable to abandon her love for gold and silver jewelry. Thus after a long time, Luo Shuiyan got used to it. The looks were all pink and could not be taken seriously. Luo Shuiyan herself came from a military family and even though she was shrewd and beautiful, her dressing was more heroic and had the meaning of a heroine. Shen Qiu stuck out his tongue and said softly, "If younger sister wear gold and glitter this time." Before his voice landed, one heard a creak sound and the door was pushed open. Younger sister. Shen Qiu opened his mouth and stared at Shen Miao like a fool without speaking. The young female was wearing a purple silk dress and a lotus green rabbit fur cloak. The fluffy rabbit fur was piled up under her neck, making that small face look like it was only the size of a palm. She had a fair complexion and when she wore the lotus green color, it did not seem dark at all and instead made her look extremely noble. Her bright eyes and white teeth had a light and breezy attitude. The young female's posture was delicate, but what attracted one's attention was her quiet and noble posture. Every move seemed to have a faint majesty. Luo Shuiyan and Shin Xian stared blankly. In an instant, it was as if they could see past this young girl to the back of the throne room and the noble golden phoenix under the heavy palace walls. They were even inferior to the golden phoenix. It was because Shin Miao used to wear gold and silver that the more simple she was, the more noble she looked, and that kind of quiet attitude was something that they had never seen before. Luo Shuiyan unconsciously caressed her chest. Because she came from the northwest desert, after marrying Shin Xian and coming to the Ding capital, she was often ridiculed by the noble ladies here for being vulgar and lacking in etiquette. Luo Shuiyan herself had secretly invited a Momo over to learn, but even if she could learn it, she was unable to learn that kind of refined elegance of an aristocratic family, thus she gave up. Now her daughter looked more noble and dignified than any noble female in the Ding capital. How could she not be pleasantly surprised? Ha ha ha. It was still Shin Xian who broke the silence first. He looked up and laughed a few times, and when he looked at Shin Miao again, his eyes were filled with pride and smiles. The Shin family has a daughter who has just grown up. My Jiao Jiao is now also a great beauty. His words were extremely rough and provoked Luo Shuiyan to glare at him fiercely. When she turned her head, she saw the guards from the army that Shin Qiu had brought back, and they were also staring at Shin Miao. She could not help but feel a trace of pride before saying, "Never mind. Let us board the carriage first, it would not be good to be late." Finishing, she pulled Shin Miao and spoke to her intimately. Shin Miao was not used to being treated as a child like this, but when she saw Shin Xian's and Shin Qiu's doting eyes, she paused for a moment. After all, in her father, mother and older brother's eyes, she was still that Shin Jiao Jiao. Ren Wanyun noticed the begonia hairpin on Shin Miao's head and even smiled. Jiao Jiao's hairpin is really beautiful. Did you pick it yourself? Chapter 165. Shin Miao vaguely responded, and when she walked to the door, she saw that there were already 2 carriages parked there. Shin Gui and Shin Wan stood outside, and when they saw Shin Miao and entourage walking over, their gazes were somewhat unnatural. These days, Shin Xian did not have a good expression towards the 2 brothers, and no matter how they explained, he would not listen. Even the daily greetings to old Shin Furen, Luo Shuiyan, was sloppy, as though it was a routine which almost made old Shin Furen faint from anger. Eldest brother. Shin Wan was more tactful and greeted Shin Xian with a smile. Shin Xian made an N sound from his nose and walked to his own carriage before saying to Shin Miao, "Furen, Jiao Jiao, both of you enter first." Shin Xian and Shin Qiu did not have the habit of riding a carriage, so they followed the carriage and rode horses outside. Being left out like this, Shin Gui and Shin Wan's faces were not good, and a trace of anger flashed in Shin Gui's eyes. One of the other 2 carriages opened the curtains and revealed Shin Yu's and Shin Roqiu's faces. Shin Yu said softly, "Does 5th younger sister want to sit in the same carriage with us? This carriage is big enough and eldest Shin can fit." "No need." Luo Shuiyan said with a cold face, "One's own carriage, one can sit at ease." Shin Miao almost wanted to applaud Luo Shuiyan in her heart. Previously Luo Shuiyan did not have any discord with the other 2 households, and she had a straightforward and warm personality, thus no one had seen such a mean side of her. One had to know that on the battlefield, Luo Shuiyan was even more ruthless when facing the enemy. Chen Roqiu's and Shin Yu's goodwill did not have any effect on her. In the other carriage, Shin Qing and Ren Wanyun were also listening to the movements outside. Chen Qing's complexion was still somewhat pale, but she held on to Ren Wanyun's hand tightly and unconsciously used her strength, causing Ren Wanyun to cry out in a low voice. When Chen Qing let go of her hand, Ren Wanyun's wrist showed scratches from her nails. Ren Wanyun did not have the mind to care about her own hand as she pulled Shin Qing into her embrace and felt that Shin Qing's body was slightly trembling. "Qing-er," Ren Wanyun softly comforted. "I must kill her." In her embrace, Shen Qing gritted her teeth and said. She had gradually regained her senses and recalled the terrifying encounter that night in Wulong Temple. And all of this was thanks to Shen Miao. What was even more terrifying was that she was already pregnant and the child in her stomach could not be aborted. Otherwise, she might not be able to be a mother for the rest of her life. Thinking of the suffering that she had suffered, Chen Qing couldn't wait to let Shen Miao feel the pain that she had suffered. No, she should let Shen Miao suffer 10 times the pain. Mother will take revenge for you. Ren Wanyun's heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife and could not wait to turn into a wolf and bite off Shen Miao's throat. Shen Qing's tearful complaint was like a knife stabbing into her heart. Whenever she faced Shen Qing, she would always think of that night. She was originally next door, but she chose to stand by and watch. I will take revenge for Qing'er. Ren Wanyun muttered. In another carriage, Shen Yu and Chen Roqiu were sitting face to face. Just now when she was reprimanded by Luo Shuiyan, Shen Yu was somewhat displeased. Deep in her bones, she looked down on Luo Shuiyan, that kind of vulgar martial artist, and now that she was being ridiculed by her own vulgar martial artist, she had a stomach full of anger. You err. Chen Roqiu gently frowned. How many times have I told you that you do not need to care about this kind of person? Why lose your bearing because of her? Mother, I just cannot bear to see it. Shen Yu looked at her palms. Shen Miao used to treat us respectfully, but now that eldest Bo's family has returned, she also put on such an arrogant attitude. A dog that relies on its master's power. If this is not done deliberately for us to see, then what is it? In her words, there was a sense of jealousy that even she did not have. Chapter 166. This little bit of jealousy was caught by Chen Roqiu. She looked at her slender and elegant daughter and sighed. I have taught you before that no matter what, you must maintain your calm. It seems that you are still too young and unable to keep your composure and advance too rashly. After a pause, Chen Roqiu continued, you do not need to see Shen Miao as important. Now the first household and second household are in a deadlock. Shen Miao had offended your second Shen, so your second Shen will definitely seek revenge. When Shen Yu heard it, she looked at Chen Roqiu, but these days, second Shen did not do anything to Shen Miao. Chen Roqiu was slightly startled. It was true that Ren Wanyun had been dealing with Shen Miao for a long time, but after such a long time, not only did Ren Wanyun not gain any benefits, she even went for wool but came home shorn and made a lot of mistakes. Now Shen Miao had waited for Shen Xian. It was fine if it was other people, but Ren Wanyun, who had always been shrewd and experienced, was able to tame all the concubines in the inner courtyard, but she was actually unable to win against a young lady. This was somewhat strange. After a moment, Chen Roqiu put away the surprise in her heart and said, it is precisely because your second Shen had not succeeded all along that your second Shen's temper is now close to a violent rage, so in order to deal with Shen Miao, she would definitely take the risk out of desperation and use all her strength. At this time, even with your eldest Bo's protection, Shen Miao would not be able to escape even if she had wings. Shen Yu listened in a daze but seemed to understand something and said, as such, we only need to sit down and watch the show. Correct. Chen Roqiu said, this is what I want to teach you. In the inner courtyard, if you cannot take action then do not take action. If you can use other things to achieve your goal then do not take action personally. If we make good use of it, we will be able to benefit from it effortlessly. Thanking Mother for the teachings. Shen Yu sat up straight, I understand. They were still talking happily, unaware that Luo Shuiyan's carriage had already left them far behind. Shen Qiu and Shen Xian rode on the tall horse and along the way, the commoners who recognized them all looked at them with admiration. The ominous name of the mighty general had already spread far and wide among the people. In the carriage, Luo Shuiyan kept smiling at Shen Miao. Even if Shen Miao was calm and steady, she was somewhat baffled by Luo Shuiyan's laughter. Jiao Jiao is really beautiful now, Luo Shuiyan sighed, I haven't seen you for a year and you've grown into a young lady. In this Ding capital, one fear that no one is as good-looking as you. Luo Shuiyan's words had always been somewhat domineering. If these words fell into the ears of others, they would probably become a laughing stock. But it was the best for parents to see their daughter, and in addition Luo Shuiyan's temperament was rather violent, but now Shen Miao looked calm and noble. People would always favor things that they did not have, so naturally Luo Shuiyan loved this daughter who was suddenly willing to get close to them like a jewel. Shen Miao smiled slightly. Most likely only her family would be proud of her so-called idiot. Last night I have discussed with your father. Luo Shuiyan changed the topic. Previously you said to let your father stay in the Ding capital for half a year more. This idea is not bad. Your father and I are often not in the residence, so we still have to accompany you more. When His Majesty asks about it today, your father will plead with His Majesty. Hearing this, Shen Miao couldn't help but be stunned. She had thought that Shen Xian would eventually listen to her words, but did not expect that it would be this fast. Before she could react, Luo Shuiyan had already hugged her and smiled, just nice in this half a year, I can also watch Jiao Jiao grow up. Luo Shuiyan had a fierce reputation in front of her enemies, but in front of Shen Miao, she was very loving. If her former opponents were to see this, one feared that their teeth would fall out from shock. Thanking Mother. Shen Miao snuggled up to Luo Shuiyan and said softly. Chapter 167. Today's last night banquet was not a so-called celebration banquet. It was bound to be extremely dangerous, and when capable people compete, everyone would want to defeat the other party. After laying out the situation and burying the pieces, one would wait for the moment when the other party falls into the trap. Of course to her, the most important thing was her previous life imprisoned her, buried her children and loved ones, filled with enemies and killings. She finally wanted to return to the 9 palaces. Emperor Wen Hui, the Fu family and those old friends in the palace. Meeting again, it was unknown who would emerge victorious. Her lips slightly hooked up, and in the depths of her clear eyes, a dark light was like a whirlpool that gradually set off a black storm. The 9 palaces were majestic, glazed tiles, carved vermilion lacquer, golden dragons entrenched and colorful phoenixes dancing. It was bright and dazzling, but also cold and desolate and miserable. Light was only on the outside, like the fertile soil under the flowers. There were countless bones buried in the depths of the palaces and countless beauties, but at the end, the beautiful bones would wither. The more beautiful the palaces looked, the more dangerous it was. In the garden, a palace maid and a eunuch were watering the flowers. These boring and tedious tasks were done by the new eunuchs and palace maids. Both of them looked to be only 16 or 17 years old and were still very immature. That young palace maid said, "Today there are a lot of people in the front hall. If I did not make a mistake and was demoted, I would be able to go to the front hall to serve those noble people. One must know that every year for the returning banquet, just the rewards can be used for a year." Returning banquet. That young eunuch revealed a yearning expression. Is it very powerful to have so many rewards? Look at you who have no knowledge. The palace maid's lips twitched, really lonely and taciturn. The returning banquet is a banquet that His Majesty specially prepared for the formidable great general. Those who come are all high-ranking officials and womenfolk, so naturally they are generous. If you wait for a few more years and if your luck is good, perhaps you would be able to see it once. At that time you will know that the rewards from those noble people are given in ingots. An ingot of silver? The young eunuch exclaimed and then said enviously, "That formidable great general has such a big face that His Majesty specially set up a banquet for him. He must be in the limelight." What's the use of being in the limelight? The palace maid's tone was disdainful. Having such an idiot daughter, it's good that you didn't lose all your face. What limelight is there? Idiot's daughter? The little eunuch asked, the formidable great general's daughter? You probably don't know about this. The palace maid said mysteriously that General Shen is wise and powerful. Shen Furen is also considered a heroine. Little assistant General Shen is also brave and good at fighting, but the formidable great general's daughter is a complete idiot. Not only did he not know anything about the four arts, but he also liked to wear gold and silver, which was very tacky. Every time General Shen brought her to the returning banquet, she would make a fool of herself. Last year at the returning banquet, I waited on her. You don't know, but she didn't even know basic etiquette. She even missed her dress and rolled down the stairs. Those young ladies and madams loved to mock her the most. Even with the Shen family's protection, everyone still looks down on Miss Shen. Since it was like this. The little eunuch sighed when he heard it. It was a waste of the Shen family's reputation. Is it not so? The palace maid continued. She could be considered as the Shen family's failure. Unfortunately, her two older cousins are more outstanding than her, causing General Shen's face to be thrown away by her. Moreover, previously this young lady of the Shen family was infatuated with His Highness Prince Ding and caused such an uproar that the entire court knew about it. Really a vulgar female. The little eunuch also revealed a look of disgust. That palace maid stayed in the palace every day and was not like those officials Furens and young ladies who could leave the palace, thus what she knew were all things that happened in the palace. Thus during the academy examinations, when Shen Miao was able to wash away the reputation of being vulgar, she did not know about it at all. Chapter 168. Just as they were speaking, they saw someone coming from the opposite side. Both of them quickly buried their heads in their work and did not dare to speak. But they heard that person walking in front of them and said with a sharp voice, "Newcomer?" Replying to Gao Gonggang, "It is." Someone answered at the side. The little eunuch boldly looked up and saw 3 people standing in front of him. One of them was dressed as a chief eunuch and the other was dressed as a second-rank eunuch. The one called Gao Gonggang was the one dressed as a chief eunuch. Gao Gonggang swept a glance at both of them and his eyes landed on the little eunuch before asking, "What is your name?" "This servant Xiao Li Zi." The little eunuch was also quick-witted and quickly replied respectfully. "Then it shall be him." Gao Gonggang said to the person beside him, "There is a lack of a pot-bearer in the front banquet. He looks well-behaved and would most likely be able to please the noble's eyes. Let him take over." Yes. Xiao Lizi's heart was also excited. As such, he would be able to follow what the palace maid said just now and obtain a lot of money as a reward. If he was able to catch the eyes of any master, perhaps he would have some good fortune in the future. In the 9-layered imperial palace, everyone was trying their best to climb up. Even the lowliest servant would dream of flying up to the top of the tree in one night. In the front hall, there were already many Furens and young ladies who had arrived. Other than those who had some relationship with the concubines in the palace and were invited to the back to talk to the ladyships, most of the womenfolk were still sitting outside chatting. Why is Shen Furen and General Shen not here yet? A Furen with high cheekbones smiled. Today's main character is them. Is it that they deliberately came late? Shen Furen wants to hide her daughter from others, so she deliberately hid it. Another round-faced Furen said with a smile, but the tone of her words was full of ridicule. Shen Xian, as the formidable great general with outstanding meritorious services, did not take in concubines and had the ability to be loyal to Luo Shuiyan. Which of the noble Furens present did not have a lot of concubines in their family and had countless messy matters? Naturally they were full of jealousy towards Luo Shuiyan's good life. Her husband doted on her and her son was outstanding. What females loved to compare the most was that Luo Shuiyan was more blessed and the other Furens were more jealous and wished that Luo Shuiyan would also be bad. Thus Shen Miao's appearance became the only thing that could strike Luo Shuiyan. Shen Miao was stupid and had no talent. Her appearance was not good and she could still make a fool of herself in the palace. Every year at this time, it was the happiest time for these Furens. To be able to see Shen Xian and his wife being humiliated because of this daughter, it was as if they could gain some benefits. Don't know what kind of clothes 5th Shen young lady will wear this year. A mocking smile floated on Yi Pei Lan's face. Last year her clothes with gold leaves pasted on it was very beautiful and matched with her gold jewelry. It was considered very noble. Could it be silver leaf this year? These words immediately caused the surrounding young ladies to echo in agreement, and their sarcastic remarks rang out incessantly. Just at this moment, a crisp female voice appeared out of thin air. Everyone must not say that. Now 5th Shen young lady can be considered to have received the teachings of General Shen. One must know that even the young master of the Kai family could not do anything to the archery in the academy examinations. What if he is unhappy and wants to exchange pointers with you on another day? As soon as these words came out, the crowd immediately quietened down. Many of the Furins and young ladies here were present at the academy examinations and personally witnessed Shen Miao's fierceness. These words made their hearts involuntarily shiver. That Kai Lin did not even put Shen Miao in his eyes. What if she was angered and an arrow was shot over? The one who said these words was Feng Ning, and when she said it, she received a disapproving stare from Feng Furen. It would not be fun to offend so many Furins. Feng Ning wrinkled her nose unhappily. She could not bear to see these people speaking ill of others behind their backs. In front of Shen Xian, one feared that they would not even dare to let out a fart and still rush to fawn on him and speak ill of others' daughter behind his back. Before the awkward atmosphere dissipated, one could hear a eunuch shouting from outside, "The formidable great general has arrived." Everyone's eyes looked towards the door. The one walking at the front was Shen Xian and Shen Qiu. Shen Xian walked like a dragon and tiger and did not show anger. There was an iron-blooded aura of a soldier that made the Furins in the hall feel terrified. Shen Qiu's posture was tall and his smile was warm. His 2 shallow dimples made him look very amiable, and all the young females could not help but blush. The 2 of them did not linger in the front hall. They turned sideways and walked towards the main hall, where the men were. Everyone's eyes naturally fell behind them. Luo Shuiyan was wearing a sky-green soft armor with a waist, and her hair was combed into a neat bun. She was different from those Furins who had heavy makeup. Her outfit was extremely refreshing and simple, but because of the high quality of the fabric, it did not look rough. Her beautiful eyes were moving, and there was a bold and heroic spirit, which was a kind of beauty that was different from ordinary Furins. Following closely behind was a slender purple figure that leisurely walked over. Chapter 169. The originally noisy front hall quietened down in a moment, and everyone's eyes landed on the purple figure behind Luo Shuiyan. The young female's cloak had already been taken off, and she was wearing a purple silk dress with complex patterns that outlined her slim figure. She slightly raised her chin and looked straight ahead, as if the many noble Furins here were not even able to enter her eyes. Her skin was so fair that it was somewhat translucent, but it made her look more delicate and pretty. However, that pair of bright black eyes was the most attractive part. Her eyes were round and her gaze was clear. At first glance, it was as pure as a newborn little beast, but it was so calm that it seemed to have seen through decades of time. This kind of vicissitudes and immaturity intertwined together made her have a kind of contradictory beauty. She followed Luo Shuiyan's footsteps and walked step by step into the hall. Different from Luo Shuiyan's nimble movements, that young female's hands were crossed in front of her chest, but it did not make one feel stiff. It was as if that action had been done thousands of times and one was familiar with it. Even if it was done casually, it was accurate to the slightest. Her long dress fluttered along with her footsteps like a blooming flower, but that flower was in full bloom and was not ostentatious, just like her entire person. Her movements were very natural and every step she took was very beautiful. It was pleasing to the eye, and at the same time there was a faint majesty. The women present were all from noble families and naturally had experienced the strict teachings of etiquette instructors on the etiquette of the palace. They thought that they had done a good job here and could not help but be surprised when they saw this young female. This was because if it was them, they would not be able to walk such beautiful steps. Sometimes the shape could be imitated, but the expression could not be imitated. The purple-clad young female's expression did not change and her posture was calm as if this road was her own backyard. There was no panic, caution, impulsiveness or timidity as she walked lightly. There was actually a feeling of looking down on all living beings. It was as if she was the owner of this palace. When this thought flashed in their minds, those women could not help but turn pale with fright. It was because if this young female was someone else, it was that idiot Shen Miao. Previously at the academy examinations, Shen Miao's change was obvious to everyone, but since then, Shen Miao and Shen Qing claimed to be sick and stayed in the residence, not even going to Guangwentang. Even though she had defeated Kai Lin in the academy examinations, what she displayed was only viciousness and boldness, but etiquette and bearing was not something that could be achieved overnight. Shen Miao had suffered so many losses in the returning banquet and it was not an easy matter to reverse it. Who knew that upon seeing Shen Miao today, one would feel that Shen Miao was a completely different person from the past. Not only was there no mistakes in her attire and actions, everyone had a faint feeling that Shen Miao had surpassed all the other officials' daughters in the hall. Shen Miao followed behind Luo Shuiyan and faced everyone's various gazes. No one could see the stiffness on her lips. After more than 10 years, she had finally returned to this place. In her previous life, she had fought and fought in this cage against fate. She wanted to see if this place could still trap her in this lifetime. Every brick and every tile here was deeply engraved in her heart. Even if she closed her eyes, she could still find the way. As for those cumbersome palace etiquette, it was done day after day and it was almost engraved into her bones. In this hall, when one closed one's eyes, it was as if one could see the scene of Wan Yu smiling and begging her for pastries to eat, and Fu Ming shaking his head and reciting the country's policies. Love and hate were equal, bitterness and sweetness were mixed together. Once again stepping into this place, all sorts of feelings welled up and what was burning in her heart was the flame of revenge. Xiao Lizi stared blankly at the purple-clad young female walking behind the valiant-looking woman and his heart was endlessly shocked. Just now he heard from the palace maids in the garden that Shen Xian's daughter was a coarse idiot, but who knew that when he saw her now, it was not the case at all. There was a kind of noble air lingering around this young female's body, as if one would not be able to withstand that prestige if one looked at her more. How could she be an idiot? Chapter 170. Just as he was thinking, he saw the girl's gaze sweep over him, and she slightly froze. Xiao Lizi suddenly became nervous. He only knew that he had never seen the young lady of the Shen family before. Could it be that this was what the old people in the palace referred to as fate at first sight? Then wouldn't the young miss of the Shen family value him? Just as he was feeling terrified and excited in his heart, he saw that Shen Miao's gaze had instantly turned away, as if it was just an accident. Xiao Lizi's heart was somewhat disappointed in a split second. He did not know why, but he felt that after climbing up this Shen family's young lady, there would be a big fortune waiting for him. But now, he seemed to have missed that great opportunity. Before waiting for Xiao Lizi to figure out where this inexplicable idea came from, a tall Furen sitting at the front of the hall had already smiled and said, "Shen Furen, you really made people wait for a long time." Luo Shuiyan furrowed her brows slightly, and then a bright smile blossomed on her face. There were some delays on the road. Fifth young lady is really getting prettier by the day. That tall Furen's eyes landed on Shen Miao again and said with half truth and half falsehood, "Indeed a person who is going to be engaged." Thinking back to the beginning, she was still a little girl. Hearing this, Luo Shuiyan's smile immediately sank. The matter of Shen Miao's engagement was simply inexplicable to Luo Shuiyan. It was the Shen residence's people who did it behind her and Shen Xian's back, but she did not admit it at all and was not afraid of offending the Wei family. In terms of family background, the Wei family was not bad, but it could not be compared to Shen Xian. At most she would offend the Wei family, and what was more important than Shen Miao's happiness? Moreover, at this moment Wei Furen was not present. Wanting to clarify these matters for Shen Miao, Luo Shuiyan opened her mouth. "What are you saying?" Our Jiao Jiao has just reached a marriageable age and there is no need to marry so early. I want to keep Jiao Jiao by my side for a few more days. When these words came out, all the Furins and young ladies were stunned. After all, the news of Shen Miao's engagement had spread like wildfire a few days ago. Afterwards at old Shen Furin's birthday banquet, the rest of the Shen family almost tacitly agreed, but now when it came to Luo Shuiyan, it seemed that the marriage was going to be empty. The tall lady squinted her eyes as if she sensed that something was amiss. Her smile became more and more meaningful as she said, "Oh. So Shen Furin still wanted to keep 5th Shen young miss for a few more days? But a few days ago wasn't it said that 5th Shen young lady was going to be engaged?" Furin really knows how to joke. Luo Shuiyan was not afraid of any face, and was even more not afraid that the internal conflicts of the Shen family would be exposed in front of everyone. With relatives like the rest of the Shen family, what was the point of protecting their face? She raised her eyebrows and said loudly, "How can there be a daughter's engagement without her parents knowing anything? Master, and I don't know what madam is talking about, so where did the engagement come from?" As soon as Luo Shuiyan finished speaking, whispers sounded in the surroundings. The tall lady didn't expect Luo Shuiyan to say that, so she was stunned for a moment. Correct, there was nothing in this world that the parents of a daughter did not know about. For Luo Shuiyan and Shen Xian to not know about Shen Miao's engagement, there was only one reason: the Shen family hid it from them. As for why the Shen family wanted to do this, there were a lot of reasons. Just as everyone was pondering, Ren Wanyun, Chen Roqiu and the rest also arrived. Shen Gui and Shen Wan naturally went to the men's main hall first. Ren Wanyun brought Shen Qing, Chen Roqiu and Shen Yu over slowly. This was the first time Shen Qing went out after she was bedridden, and these days she had lost a lot of weight. She was originally at the best age of a young female, but now there was a faint old fatigue. In order to cover up her haggardness, she put on a thick layer of rouge and powder, and wore a red dress. Shen Qing was not suitable for such gorgeous colors, and with one look, it was very unsuitable and somewhat incongruous. In addition, there was a child in her abdomen, so even though she tried her best to cover it up, her steps looked somewhat unsteady. Chapter 171. As for Shen Yu, she was as usual wearing a pink long embroidered dress with a light twist and a thin layer of makeup. She looked like a weak and scholarly little beauty. If it was in the past, she would be able to attract everyone's attention, but today it was not the case. With Shen Miao's example, Shen Yu's steps seemed to be a little jerky, her movements were a little stiff and her expression was a little nervous. Even her hands were clasped together with too much strength. In short, she could not be compared to Shen Miao at all. Thinking about this, everyone's expression became somewhat strange. When did Shen Yu, who was in the limelight in the Shen family, was actually left far behind by Shen Miao? Shen Yu was young and did not know, but Chen Roqiu was sensitive enough to detect the difference in those Furins' eyes. If it was in the past, the gaze that landed on her mother and daughter would be filled with jealousy and admiration, but today it seemed to be more picky. Chen Roqiu's brows jumped. This etiquette and figure had always been the part that she was most proud of, and she was also very strict with Shen Yu. She was confident that no noble female in the Ding capital could do better than her daughter, but looking at these people's expressions, who else could do better? Naturally, she did not know that the person who did better than Shen Yu was right in front of her. Shen Miao sat beside Luo Shuiyan. Even though Luo Shuiyan was considered as the main character of this returning banquet, it seemed that she was isolated. It was indeed so. The noble families in the capital had always had their own circle. It was still all right for the males as they spoke with their scholarly titles and intertwined in their careers. Even if one did not like it in their heart, they would still have to go over it on the surface. Females were different. Most of the noble females in the capital were proud and arrogant. For example, the Di daughters were not willing to play with the Shu daughters, and the people who were born and raised in the Ding capital looked down on outsiders. Luo Shuiyan was that outsider. It was alright if she came from a rich and fertile land in Jiangnan, but unfortunately Luo Shuiyan came from the bitter cold northwest region, and when she just married to the Ding capital, Luo Shuiyan did not even know how to speak, and that accent was secretly ridiculed by these Furans for a long time. They ridiculed that the northwest desert was extremely windy and sandy and the female's skin was extremely delicate. There were bandits everywhere and one feared that one would be robbed on the road. As for resources, it was even more scarce and it was hard to see good silk and satin throughout the year. Of course, there were elements of exaggeration in this, but the targeting of Luo Shuiyan was real. Moreover, Luo Shuiyan was the first one in the Ding capital to go to the battlefield by herself. When faced with something that they could not do, if it was rare, people would often reject it. This was not only the case for women, but also for men. Thus Luo Shuiyan was ostracized by the circle of noble females in the Ding capital. In addition, Shen Miao was previously an out-and-out idiot, so this mother and daughter pair were the targets of these Furans' secret ridicule. Bai Wei's mother, Madame Bai, asked Chen Ruoqiu to sit next to her. She and Chen Ruoqiu were close friends, so naturally, she had to sit with Chen Ruoqiu. Bai Wei pulled Shen Yu to her side. Ren Wanyun walked over to Yi Furan and sat down. Yi Pei Lan looked at Shen Qing and complained, "You have not appeared for a long time. I heard that you are ill. You look thinner, but why is your face a little swollen?" Shen Qing lowered her head in panic and said vaguely, "Perhaps I've been lying in bed for too long." Ren Wanyun had decocted a lot of medicine for her to soothe the miscarriage. Even though Shen Qing hated the child in her tummy, she was even more afraid that she would not be able to be a mother after the miscarriage, thus she could only clench her teeth and drink it. Since it was to nourish the fetus, one could not do without all kinds of supplements, so naturally one would be fatter. Even though the figure was not visible, it was already somewhat swollen. Yi Pei Lan did not suspect anything and only patted Shen Qing's hands. "You must take care of your body. You are already one who is going to be engaged, one must not spoil your body." Chapter 172. Shen Qing's body trembled and she lowered her head and did not speak. She knew that Ren Wanyun had told her about the Huang family's marriage and that Huang Dexing was considered a young talent, but she did not know why her heart was very resistant to this marriage. It was as if her intuition told her that under this bright and beautiful marriage, there was an unknown danger. Yi Pei Lan's voice was not soft and was heard by Huang Furan who was sitting at the side. When Huang Furan heard it, she looked at Shen Qing critically. Regarding this marriage, she merely wanted to find a nominal wife for her son. Shen Qing could be considered as a good match for her son, but looking at her sickly appearance today, it would be better if she wasn't a sickly invalid. After all, she still had to carry on the Huang family's ancestral line and give birth to a son. As for the rest, she could do whatever she wanted. At the other end, Bai Furan was quietly whispering to Chen Ruoqiu, "Ruoqiu, I see that the fifth young lady in your residence is not simple." "Oh?" Chen Ruoqiu asked curiously, "Why do you say so?" "One fear that there is someone guiding fifth Shen young lady from behind. Just now when she came in, all the Furans had seen it. That posture and etiquette was even more proper than in the palace. If I say something that one does not like to hear, one fear that your error is much inferior." Chen Ruoqiu was startled. "What are you saying? Who does not know that fifth lady does not understand etiquette?" Bai Wei was Chen Ruoqiu's best friend and also came from a scholarly family, thus naturally the requirements for etiquette were very high. Today she looked up to Shen Miao so highly, which made Chen Ruoqiu feel that it was inconceivable. At the same time that she felt that it was ridiculous, she could not help but look towards the place where Luo Shuiyan was sitting. Luo Shuiyan was isolated as she sat at one side and Shen Miao was next to her. Luo Shuiyan was after all old and had a lot of experience, so even if no one paid attention to her, she would not have the slightest change in expression. She only needed to bring out the same imposing manner that she had on the battlefield that would not change color even if Empress collapsed in front of her. But Shen Miao, a young female, also sat upright. If others did not speak to her, it did not look like they were deliberately ignoring her but more like they did not dare to speak to her. Chen Rochio's fingertips were somewhat trembling. The womenfolk all had their own thoughts, and in the main hall, Shen Xian's words had also set off a huge wave in the hall. Official Shen's words are true? Emperor Wenhui asked. Emperor Wenhui was close to 60 years of age but did not look old at all. There was a smile on his face and his pair of eyes were astute and sharp, and one could faintly see the sharpness of his youth. At this moment, he looked down at Shen Xian and asked in a low voice. Just now in front of all the officials, Emperor Wenhui rewarded Shen Xian, but Shen Xian requested for Emperor Wenhui to bestow a grace to allow him to stay in the Ding capital for half a year as he wanted to accompany his wife and daughter in the residence. For so many years, the formidable great general Shen Xian had fought on the battlefield and was brave and invincible, but he had never made such a request. For a moment, it made people think deeply and the expressions of the officials changed. At this critical moment, Shen Xian wanted to stay in the capital for half a year. Was it really just to accompany his loved ones? Emperor Wenhui sized up Shen Xian. He had not died yet, but the fight for the throne between the princes was already like a storm. Now the situation was ever-changing and any party's intervention would cause the entire situation to change. A few days ago, the matter of Shen Xian's daughter, Shen Miao, being infatuated with Prince Ding had spread like wildfire. Emperor Wenhui even thought about what would happen if this fat piece of meat of the Shen family landed in Fu Xiuyi's hands, but who knew that there was suddenly no news of it? Now that Shen Xian suddenly made such a request, could it be that there was another plan? He carefully sized up the man below. Shen Xian's skin was dark and his eyes were firm. His figure was as straight as a hill, and when he looked at Emperor Wenhui, his actions were also respectful. He was a loyal and brave Iron Man. But when an emperor controls his subjects, it was never based on the surface but the value. To Emperor Wenhui, if there was a threat to the country, even if it was a huge merit, it must be removed cleanly. Chapter 173. After a moment, Emperor Wenhui laughed out loud. For so many years, official Shen has been guarding the northwestern region, and now that the enemy has been defeated, Shen is deeply gratified. It is Ming Qi's blessing to have such a general. Official Shen's request, Shen will approve. Shen Xian immediately thanking your majesty. This action made the other people in the hall to look at him. After Emperor Wenhui approved, he walked out of the main hall, leaving a group of people behind. Shen Xian's action just now was unexpected, and the first to speak was actually the Marquis of Lineage, Xie Ding. This person who had been dealing with the Shen family for a lifetime obviously did not understand Shen Xian's actions and ridiculed. Could it be that General Shen is afraid of the war and stay in the Ding capital for half a year to enjoy? When Shen Xian heard it, he was not angry and even smiled, revealing his white teeth. Is Marquis Xia envious of this general? It is no wonder, after all Marquis Xia does not have a wife and daughter. You. Xie Ding's face was livid. Shen Xian, this fellow looked like a big and rough person without any schemes, but in fact his mouth was the most poisonous. Princess Yuqing's death and Xie Jingxing treating him like a stranger was Xie Ding's Achilles heel, and Shen Xian mercilessly stabbed him with a knife. Xie Ding really wished that he could use a spear to stab Shen Xian to death. Fu Xiuyi looked at Shen Xian and his expression was rather interesting. The Shen family had exceeded his expectations time and time again. In the past Shen Miao admired him, and even though he was annoyed, he thought that he could make use of the Shen family. Afterwards Shen Miao actually clarified that she had no such intentions towards him and caused Fu Xiuyi to be ridiculed by Prince Zhou and Prince Jing. Now that Shen Xian proposed to stay in the capital for half a year, it made people even more puzzled. Fu Xiuyi had an inexplicable feeling that the Shen family that seemed to be the easiest to grasp suddenly became an unstable rock. It seemed that in the future, there would be numerous variables that would affect the overall situation. Shen Xian's unconventional moves made the officials somewhat inexplicable, but the rewards that he obtained today made everyone jealous. The rest of the people went up one after another and sincerely or falsely congratulated him. Shin Xian talked to them about the interesting matters in the northwest region but did not notice that there was a gloomy gaze behind him. That gaze stared fixedly at Shin Xian, as if it was a man-eating poisonous snake entrenched in the grass, waiting for the opportunity to rush up and bite him to death. And that person who was looking at Shin Xian, the corner of his robe was empty and was playing with the thumb ring in his hand. It was not someone else but Prince Yu. The atmosphere here was rather lively and Shin Qiu had also blocked Wei Qian in the corridor outside. Wei Qian was also considered talented and humble, but compared to the healthy and energetic Shin Qiu, he seemed too weak and frail. He looked at Shin Qiu and asked with a frown, "Little Deputy General Shen, why are you stopping me?" Shin Qiu sized up Wei Qian from head to toe. He himself had a cheerful and friendly temperament, and if he met Wei Qian in the past, perhaps he would make friends, but after hearing Shin Miao say that Wei Qian already had a sweetheart in his heart, looking at this person again made him angry. From Shin Qiu's point of view, his younger sister was very good, but she did not like others. How could she tolerate being despised? "You are Wei Qian." Thinking of this, Shin Qiu's tone was not very happy. Wei Qian was startled for a moment and sensed that the person who came was not kind. "Exactly. I am here for nothing." Shin Qiu patted Wei Qian's shoulder and said, "Just to inform you that previously there was a rumor that my younger sister was engaged to your Wei family. Since it is a rumor, my Shin family did not take it to heart, so your Wei family need not take it to heart." Shin Qiu took a step back and acted as if nothing had happened but said in an eerie tone, "My younger sister is picking a husband, so naturally she must first ask my eyes." Finishing, he did not even look at Wei Qian's face as he turned and strode away. Wei Qian was stunned at the same spot. Shin Qiu's words clearly wanted to draw a line with his Wei family, but it was true that he had a sweetheart. Even if Shin Qiu felt injustice for his younger sister, there was no need to say that he was a good-for-nothing fool. The Shin family's protection was too fierce. Moreover, there was no chance for him to intervene in this marriage. Outside the corridor, Gao Yang was overjoyed as he looked at Wei Qian, who was standing there in a daze. He shook his head and said, "This Shin family is just too overbearing. To be so arrogant and not even put the Wei family in their eyes. Have seen enough." The purple-clad youth beside him had a hint of impatience in his eyes and his tone was not pleasant. "Is there an end to it? Wei Qian is your person." Gao Yang said, "He is being bullied like this and you are not going to stand up for him. If you like, you go." Xie Jingxing glanced at him. "I do not dare." Gao Yang said as if he was watching a good show, "That Shin family girl has so many people protecting her. If one is not careful, trouble will come knocking." But his smile was gentle but his tone was somewhat gloating. "Today Prince Yu is present, so one feared that the matter would not be good. I heard that Prince Yu plans to marry a Wangfei. Guess which Shin family's young lady he wants to marry? I guess that he cannot marry." Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows and his eyes fell to the front. In the garden, a familiar figure trotted forward and said something to the little eunuch at the other side before stuffing a sachet into the little eunuch's hands. That figure was Shin Miao's personal maid, Jing Zhe. Chapter 174. He is unable to marry. Gao Yang followed Xie Jingxing's gaze and saw that in the flowering shrubs, Shin Miao's personal maid was instructing the little eunuch something and the little eunuch complied. Most likely it was his first time receiving so much money as he was overjoyed and respectfully said something to the maid before leaving. After the little eunuch left, Jing Zhe stood at the same spot and there was a trace of suspicion on her face. Shin Miao specifically instructed her to hand the things over to this little eunuch, but this little eunuch was obviously a newcomer to the palace and did not have any interaction with Shin Miao, so why was there a special instruction? Unable to think of the reason, Jing Zhe shook her head. In any case, the purpose had been achieved, so she turned and left. This young lady of the Shin family is very courageous. Gao Yang evaluated, to even dare to play tricks in the palace, and it seems that Shen Xian was not aware of it. Xie Jingxing declined to comment. For a person who dared to burn her own ancestral hall, he never thought that the other party would be timid. As for what to do at what place, most likely in Shen Miao's eyes, there was no difference. Let's go. A strange smile floated on his lips. We should also go and watch the show. I will not go. Gao Yang blinked his eyes. Now it is better to be careful when doing things. Moreover, there is a change in the plans, so one must be more cautious. Up to you. Xie Jingxing said lazily and suddenly thought of something and casually said, if there is time, go to those old fellows at the Imperial Medical Institution to inquire if there is anything. Yes, sir. Gao Yang cupped his hands in obeisance, then walked toward the other side at a steady pace. Time passed by unhurriedly and it was almost time for the returning banquet to begin. The females sat at the bottom of the Great Hall while the males sat at the top of the Great Hall. The one on the leftmost side, near the center, was the prince. Prince Shou, Prince Jing and Prince Ding had already arrived. Following behind were Prince Li, Prince Xiang and Prince Cheng. Prince Shou and Prince Jing were brothers, so naturally they were in the same group. Prince Xiang and Prince Cheng were led by Prince Li and formed their own faction. As for His Highness the Crown Prince, who had yet to arrive, he had the support of Prince Xian and Prince Chu. As for the ninth prince, His Highness Prince Ding, Fu Xiu-yi, he did not belong to any faction and looked to be the weakest and most neutral faction. With the appearance of the three kings, the clamor in the hall gradually quietened down. Emperor Wenhui was also strange. He had 9 sons and each of them were extremely outstanding. If it was an ordinary family, they would have been overjoyed to have so many outstanding sons. But in a noble family, the more outstanding sons there were, the more intense the competition would be. What was even more unfortunate was that these 9 outstanding sons were born into the most ruthless imperial family in the world. This also meant that their excellence would become a nail in each other's eyes, and both of them wanted to get rid of it. Now that the 9 sons had grown up, even though the crown prince had been crowned, the various factions had yet to restrain themselves. When Emperor Wenhui was still around, he was still able to maintain the balance, but there would be a day when this entrenched dragon would grow old, and at that time, the imperial family of Ming Qi that was already ready to move would be another reign of terror. And in Prince Shou's faction, Prince Li's faction and the Crown Prince's faction, the Crown Prince looked to have the highest strength on the surface, but the Crown Prince's body was weak and Emperor Wenhui would not allow a weak son to sit on the dragon throne, so the Crown Prince's power was not so much that it was a follower of the orthodox lineage, but rather it was fake. If one's body was slightly unwell, it would only benefit Prince Xian and Prince Chu. In Prince Li's faction, because of the large number of people, there were many officials who secretly pledged their allegiance to him. Even though Prince Shou and Prince Jing's legitimacy was not as good as the Crown Prince's and their power was not as good as Prince Li's, but they had the emperor's doted mother, consort Su Xian, and the Su family had a strong support. Chapter 175. The remaining Prince Ding was not placed in anyone's eyes. In terms of power, it was a joke to fight alone. In terms of background, his birth mother consort Dong Shu was extremely low-key, and if she did not give birth to Fu Xiu-yi, she would not be able to sit in the position of the 4 consorts. Even though Fu Xiu-yi was outstanding and humble, there was a limit to one's strength, thus everyone was not optimistic about him. Even though Fu Xiu-yi was neutral and was not interested in the fight for the throne, but in this deep palace, one must be wary of others. His few brothers were still eyeing him covetously. However, the female guests did not look at people as deeply as the males, but the young females present were secretly sizing up Fu Xiu-yi's handsome appearance and whispered with slightly red faces. In all fairness, the Fu family all had good looks and Fu Xiu-yi was the most outstanding among the 9 princes. The imperial family bestowed him with an extraordinary bearing and he always had an indifferent attitude, not putting on a high and mighty attitude nor raising his chin up to the sky. To the young females, this kind of amiable, and out-of-this-world, male was really full of elegance. His Highness Prince Ding is indeed too handsome. A young female's whisper sounded beside her ears. Shen Miao turned her head and did not know when Feng and Ning was already by her side. She smiled at her and then said with a straight face, "Since you have arrived, why did you not come and look for me? And even put on the airs of a eldest young lady to make me look for you?" Shen Miao was somewhat inexplicable by her words. Towards Feng and Ning, this eldest young lady, sticking to her like a piece of sticky candy, Shen Miao was also somewhat helpless. She did not know when did Feng and Ning changed her attitude towards her. Shen Miao was after all not a real budding young female and was unable to be as intimate as peers with Feng and Ning. Moreover, now she was unable to accept the goodwill of others without any precaution, so she did not know how to treat Feng and Ning. Finally she could only shake her head and find an excuse, "I did not see you." Shen Miao naturally did not know that if it was the previous her, Feng and Ning would not even take a glance at her. But the current Shen Miao was the Empress who had been bathed in a storm of blood in the inner palace of Mingqi. One would have a feeling of worship towards those who were stronger than themselves. Feng and Ning could faintly feel the strength in Shen Miao's heart and naturally would unconsciously follow. Feng and Ning's lips twitched and suddenly whispered teasingly, "But His Highness Prince Ding is also here. In any case, he is also your favorite person. Why did you not take a look?" As if to prove her words, when Feng and Ning's voice landed, Jiang Shaoxian laughed loudly, "Fifth Shen young lady, His Highness Prince Ding has arrived." She wanted to embarrass Shen Miao and knew that under the watchful eyes of the public, in front of the imperial family, Shen Miao would not dare to get angry and even Luo Shuiyan would have to endure it. Feng of Shen of Shen of Shen. She Shen Shen, she of words, of Shen of the Shen. Shen tu, Ding Shen 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 Ding Shen Shen, she Ding Shen of King of Shen. Luo Shuiyan gritted her teeth. She knew that this person was deliberately provoking Shen Miao. Even though Shen Miao said that she was no longer in love with Prince Ding, but Luo Shuiyan knew that liking a person was not something that one could easily give up. Shen Miao looked as if nothing had happened on the surface, but one's heart was in extreme pain. Luo Shuiyan was annoyed that Shen Xian was not present at this time. She turned her head to look at Shen Miao, fearing that Shen Miao would be sad and said softly, "Jiao Jiao." At the male side of the banquet, everyone's eyes were also very interesting. Kai Lin's lips twitched, as if he was rejoicing in others' misfortune. In the academy examinations, Shen Miao caused him to lose face and now Shen Miao herself was going to repeat his mistakes. Su Ming Feng and Su Ming Lang were sitting side by side. Su Ming Lang pulled Su Ming Feng's sleeves and said in surprise, "Eldest brother, has older sister Shen also arrived?" Chapter 176. His head was too small and the table blocked his line of sight, making it even more impossible for him to see Shen Miao clearly. Su Ming Feng shook his head. He did not know why this younger brother of his had a good impression of the fifth young lady of the Shen family. If it was not because Su Ming Lang was too young, Su Ming Feng would have thought that this younger brother of his had other thoughts about Shen Miao. But he also turned his head to look at Shen Miao. With such a close distance encounter, how would Shen Miao face Prince Ding? At the corner of the male side of the banquet, there was a green-clad male. Compared to the other noble people who were dressed in brocade clothes, his dressing was extremely simple, but this did not make him cut a sorry figure. On the contrary, because of his simple dressing, there was a kind of romantic and unrestrained attitude of an ancient scholar. At this moment, he was quietly looking at the purple-clad young female who kept her head down and there was a faint fluctuation in his eyes. This person was Pei Lang. Pei Lang was not qualified to participate in such an occasion, but today there was a death in the family of the supervisor of Guangwen Tang, thus the supervisor let Pei Lang represent Guangwen Tang to participate. Even though Pei Lang was a teacher in Guangwen Tang, he was considered as half a supervisor, thus he did not decline. Who knew that when he arrived, he would see such a scene? Prince Shou and Prince Jing stood beside Fu Xiuyi and heard Jiang Shaoxian's deliberately provocative words. Prince Shou laughed and patted Fu Xiuyi's shoulder before saying meaningfully, "Our ninth younger brother is really amazing." Fu Xiuyi's brows slightly wrinkled, but there was a faint smile on his face. Fourth older brother must be joking. Even though he said so, his eyes unconsciously drifted towards the young female in the seat. Ah! A light laugh escaped from the young female's lips and the surroundings suddenly quietened down. This laugh did not have any emotions. To say that it was ridiculing, it was too gentle. To say that it was cheerful, it was very calm. It was like a cup of strong wine that had been settled for a long time. 5 flavors were mixed together and 1,000 complex flavors were in one's heart before it finally turned into a light laughter. The males were still all right, but the females were surprised. They had been immersed in the inner courtyard for so many years, but they could not hear the meaning in Shen Miao's laughter. How old was she? Shen Miao raised her head and her eyes did not stop. It was like the arrow that was shot at Kai Lin at the academy examinations as it shot towards the figure who was standing with his hands behind his back, Fu Xiuyi. Fu Xiuyi was slightly startled. There was no infatuation, love, worship, or surprise in the girl's eyes. There was only a bottomless calm. He was like an old man who had reincarnated for 100 years, looking at him through the vicissitudes of time. There was no sorrow or joy in his eyes, but it made one feel uneasy. That pair of clear eyes had an extremely beautiful shape. If they were curved, it would be so sweet that it would remind people of the taste of honey. But she only watched quietly. In Fu Xiuyi's heart, there was a sudden surge of uneasiness. It was as if he was walking alone in the jungle, but in the depths of the grass, there was a huge beast that was staring at him. That feeling of uneasiness was getting stronger and stronger, and one did not know when the faint smile on his face had disappeared as he stared fixedly at Shen Miao. Ha! Shen Miao chuckled again, and this time everyone could see it clearly. Her rosy lips slightly curved, but the corners of her eyes did not move. It was clearly a sneer. It was probably a cold sneer formed from a faint resentment towards the person he loved but couldn't get because his love had turned into hatred. Everyone thought like this but were surprised that Shen Miao dared to express her dissatisfaction so straightforwardly. Who would have the guts to sneer at a prince in the palace? Fu Xiuyi did not move. In that sneer, he could clearly see a layer of faint murderous intention. Even though it was deliberately concealed, it was as if it could not be concealed at all. That kind of coldness that was determined to win actually caused his heart to shrink. Chapter 177. Just because he did not accept the other's intention, she had the intention to kill him? Fu Xiuyi was somewhat stunned. What made him even more surprised was that he actually felt that the intention to kill was full of threat. Could this be his illusion? When he looked at Shen Miao again, the latter had already turned her head and said something to Feng and Ning. There was a flash of killing intent in Shen Miao's eyes. After such a long time, even in the academy examinations, she only saw Fu Xiuyi from afar and did not want to meet Fu Xiuyi at such a close distance. It was because she was afraid that once she got close to Fu Xiuyi, she would not be able to hide her monstrous hatred. Jiang Shaoxian's provocative words were passed by Shen Miao's 2 inexplicable chuckles. Her first chuckle was complicated and the second chuckle was slightly cold, but even a fool could see that there was no trace of affection towards Fu Xiuyi in it. After 2 chuckles, she simply spoke directly to the young lady beside her. That contempt and disregard made one unable to tell if it was intentional or unintentional. It was just that the atmosphere was made cold by her. There was a flash of light in Prince Shou's eyes as he smiled and leaned close to Fu Xiuyi, "Ninth younger brother, it seems that you are not that invincible." Fu Xiuyi smiled bitterly, but his heart gradually paid more attention to Shen Miao. "Hey, it seems that the 5th young lady of the Shen family has some spirit," Su Mingfeng said with interest. Now that his serious illness was much better, but he was still unable to work hard, thus his official position was not restored. older Shen's sister is originally very good. Su Ming Lang rolled his eyes at him. Pei Lang, who was seated, lowered his head to take a sip of tea, but his eyes flashed with deep thoughts. Just as there was some silence, one heard a hearty laughter. Ha! Everyone, one has arrived late. That small mountain-like figure was not Shen Xian. The one following closely behind Shen Xian was Shen Qiu. Seeing that the important person had arrived, all the bureaucrats greeted him. Shen Xian greeted Prince Zhou and the rest before taking their seats. He and Shen Qiu also missed the good show just now, else even if Shen Xian did not take action, Shen Qiu did not care if he would have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex and would definitely make Jiang Shaoxian unable to bear the consequences. After Shen Xian, the princely trio and the crown prince trio also arrived. The crown prince's body was weak, but the crown princess was born with a dignified air. Shen Miao looked at the crown princess and her eyes were moved. This crown prince consort had the prime minister's family behind her, and it was the crown prince who used the power of the crown prince consort's family to stabilize his position. Afterwards, when the crown prince consort was pregnant, Emperor Wen Hui was afraid that the crown prince's body would be seriously ill and it would benefit the crown prince consort's family to monopolize power, so he used methods to make the crown prince consort miscarry. The crown princess was deeply in love with the crown prince, but she didn't know that her husband could kill his own flesh and blood. She was also afraid that if she told her paternal family, it would bring disaster to her paternal family. In the end, she died of depression. 3 years after the death of the crown prince consort, the residents of the prime minister came to know of the truth and wanted to take revenge for their daughter, but in the end they relied on Fu Xiu-yi. Shen Miao looked at the cup in front of her. The members of the Fu family were all vicious and merciless, and the men of the Fu family were all unfaithful and fickle. She and the crown princess were no different. They were all sacrifices for power, innocent pawns abandoned. Now, she was going to be the chess player. Whoever wanted to play chess had to be prepared to sacrifice themselves. After the crown princess sat down, her friends from before she got married chatted and laughed with her. Over at the male side, Prince Yu also arrived. When Prince Yu arrived, the people at the female side of the banquet were somewhat silent, especially those young females who were so scared that their faces turned pale. In the previous returning banquets, Prince Yu would not participate. For so many years, he did not put the matters of the court in his eyes, and because of this, the suspicious Emperor Wen Hui was exceptionally tolerant to this younger brother. Of course, there was the credit of Prince Yu risking his life to protect him when he was young, but if it was not for Prince Yu being well-behaved for so many years and not interfering in the matters of the court, one feared that no matter how big the life-saving grace was, it would not be able to overcome Emperor Wen Hui's suspicions. After all, Emperor Wen Hui's brothers all died in his hands. Chapter 178. Prince Yu of the first rank, who had never participated in the returning banquet, suddenly appeared, which made the female guests uneasy and the male guests puzzled, but the few princes were smiling in their hearts. The woman who was on good terms with the crown princess said, "I wonder why His Highness the Crown Prince has appeared." Her words were filled with probing intent. The crown princess naturally knew the reason. She curled the corners of her lips and said with a smile, "Royal uncle has been single for so many years. It is time to find someone to take care of his life." As soon as these words came out, the womenfolk were all bewildered. Could it be that Prince Yu of the first rank wanted to choose a Wang Fei? But becoming Prince Yu's consort was not a good thing. At least at this moment, the young ladies could not help but shrink back a little. "May I ask the crown princess," the Furen asked with a smile, "which young miss has the good fortune?" But the crown princess was unwilling to say. She only shook her head and said with a smile, "You will know in a while." Because of the crown princess's words, the womenfolk sank into a stalemate. Everyone was slightly afraid. That Yu Wang Fei's title was like a talisman that hastened one's death. Sleeping with her would only result in a faster death. How could it be considered as a good thing? Feng and Ning leaned close to Shen Miao and asked, "Make a guess, who exactly is that Yu Wang Fei?" Shen Miao said, I cannot guess. You are really boring. Feng and Ning curled her lips. On the other side, Shen Qing was tightly grabbing onto the corner of her clothes. The moment she saw Prince Yu, her mind was filled with the myriad of tortures that Prince Yu used on her that night. If it was not for Ren Wanyun who was tightly pinching her, Shen Qing would have screamed out loud. Do not be afraid of Qing'er. Ren Wanyun moved closer to Shen Qing's ear and spoke to her in a voice that only the two of them could hear. Today Prince Yu is here to help you tidy up that woman. When she enters Prince Yu residence, naturally there will be means to make her beg for death. At the side, Chen Roqiu looked at Ren Wanyun and Shen Qing's movements and drank a mouthful of tea before smiling gently. After Prince Yu, one thought that other than the Emperor and Empress, everyone had almost arrived, but suddenly there were bursts of exclamations. Feng and Ning was talking to Shen Miao when she heard the commotion and looked up. In the depths of the palace, outside the door of the main hall, a person walked over from afar. He was dressed in a purple gold robe and a pair of green silk boots. His features were bright and unbelievably handsome. His footsteps were neither fast nor slow as he walked over lazily. The Marquis of Lineage, Xie Ding first cried out in surprise, Jing Xing. Then he thought of something and frowned as he looked at the figure, unable to speak. Everyone was surprised. What was the background of today's returning banquet? Not only did Prince Yu, who never appeared at palace banquets, appear, now even the little Marquis of the Xie family, Xie Jingxing, also appeared. And the excited and infatuated look of the womenfolk was no less than when Fu Xiu-yi appeared and even steadily pressed down. The youth's posture was ramrod straight. Although his gait looked casual, each step he took had its own imposing aura. He already had an outstanding appearance to begin with, but now, with the contrast of the purple gold robe, there was a faint feeling that he couldn't be looked at directly. Her face was like snow, her eyes were like lacquer, and her eyebrows were like swords. The corners of her lips were slightly raised, like a red plum blossom that had bloomed amidst the ice and snow. This face that was more delicate than a female's did not have a trace of a female's femininity. Instead it was like the rising sun in the sky, full of dazzling eyes. When he walked over alone, all the civil and military officials seemed to have become a foil. It was as if the imperial family of Ming Qi and the dazzling golden palace had finally aroused the nobility and arrogance that was engraved in his bones. It was so handsome that it made the heaven and earth lose their colors. And this youth that was like the scorching sun had a dense and sharp gaze. That frivolous smile, if one looked carefully, was full of indifference and cruelty. Chapter 179. When did this little Marquis of the Xie family become so outstanding? Feng and Ning muttered. In the past, even though Xie Jingxing was also very handsome and flamboyant, but compared to him today, he was overshadowed. It was as if the past Xie Jingxing had deliberately covered up the brilliance, but the current Xie Jingxing had removed that layer of concealment. The real him, this elegance, compared to Fu Xiu-yi, it was as if he was the person who should stand at the peak of the dynasty overlooking all living beings. When this thought came out, Shen Miao was shocked by herself. She looked up at Xie Jingxing. The purple-clad youth walked to the front of the banquet and faced everyone's surprised gaze. He raised his eyebrows and smiled, "Today I am also here to join in the fun." As she spoke, she walked to the banquet and sat down, but it was not beside the Marquis of Lineage, Xie Ding, but beside Su Mingfeng. Su Minglang pursed his lips and reluctantly moved a small area. Seeing this, Xie Ding's face darkened. When the surrounding people saw it, even though they were discussing it, they did not obstruct it. Xie Jingxing had always had such a frivolous temperament, and most likely today he did it on a whim. The Xie family has produced an extraordinary person. Luo Shuiyan's expression was solemn. Whether it was a dragon or a worm, she had always been accurate in judging people. This Xie Jingxing's actions had a kind of magnanimity that made people feel a little dangerous for no reason. Those who had been on the battlefield were more sensitive to danger. When Shen Qiu saw Xie Jingxing, his eyes lit up and he almost stood up. He then scratched his head and grabbed the teacup in front of the table to cover up and gulped a mouthful of tea. This kind of rude behavior caused the surrounding people to look at him strangely. Shin Qiu quickly chuckled. This kid from the Xia clan is not bad. Shin Xian was very satisfied. Towards Xia Jingxing, who was able to cause trouble for his old rival, he was unable to express his appreciation in words. If the other party was not from the Xia family, he might have become sworn brothers with the other party. The princes of the Fu clan all had gloomy looks on their faces. This little marquis of the residence of the Marquis of Lin and looked too outstanding. Although he did not enter the imperial court, just based on his unruly temperament, one could already feel that he was not someone who would submit to others. If he couldn't subdue such a person, it was best to kill him as soon as possible. Seeing a marquis's residence that held the commander's seal grow stronger and produce an important figure was not something the imperial family was willing to see. At this moment, the eunuch's drawn-out voice was heard, "His Majesty has arrived, Her Majesty the Empress has arrived." The celestial Empress finally arrived as everyone had been waiting for. Emperor Wenhui seemed to be in a good mood, but the Empress was somewhat fierce. As a female, she was considered beautiful and one could see the charm of her youth, but as she grew older, her cheeks were sunken and she looked somewhat mean. Due to the crown prince's illness, the Empress's methods had always been very harsh. Previously Shin Miao stood on Fu Xiuyi's side, and after marrying to Fu Xiuyi, she was often made difficult by this Empress and suffered countless hardships in the hands of this Empress. It was also this Empress who used herself as an example to teach Shin Miao how to survive in the palace. Everything that had happened in the past was just an illusion. She had come for revenge, but her ultimate goal was to completely overthrow the entire royal family. A mayfly trying to shake a tree was like trying to save a cart with a cup of water, just like the distance between her and the Empress. But this Empress seat was originally hers, and one day, she would sit on that seat again. Shin Miao's eyes drooped down and gently picked up the teacup in front of her to take a sip. Not far from her, Shin Qing also revealed a slight smile, as if to celebrate with her, and at the same time raised the teacup to take a sip. Her smile seemed to be even more carefree. The blackness in Shin Miao's eyes became thicker and her lips curled up. It was different from a sneer, as this smile had curved eyebrows and the sweet look was extremely moving. Even at the male side of the banquet, those who noticed this side were dazzled by Shin Miao's smile. Pei Lang kept staring at Shin Miao. He did not know why he did it, as if there was something about this young female that attracted him. But a few months ago, Shin Miao was just an idiot in Guangwentang. Pei Lang treated her warmly, but it was only out of etiquette. In his heart, he looked down on her. The Emperor and Empress sat down and the banquet began. This so-called monarch and officials enjoying together was just for show. The monarch was still the monarch and the officials were still officials. Everyone were making harmless jokes, as if it was really the Son of Heaven and the common people enjoying together. Su Mingfeng nudged Xia Jingxing, "Why are you here?" "Come to watch the fun." Xia Jingxing's lips hooked up and the female side of the banquet suddenly drew in a low breath. "So boring, what fun is there to watch?" Su Mingfeng had a headache. Just as he was speaking, he saw Prince Yu opening his mouth, imperial older brother. His voice was not high nor low, but the hall immediately quietened down. It was obvious that everyone was extremely fearful of this fiend. A few days ago this younger brother had already thought clearly about the matter of the consort selection that was promised to this younger brother. Prince Yu smiled strangely. "Since today is a happy event, why not have a double happiness?" This younger brother is fond of Shin family's young lady. He said it very slowly and the viper-like light in his eyes was entangled, like maggots in a tarsal bone, tightly climbing in front of the purple-clad young female. Chapter 180. This younger brother likes Shin family's young lady. With an uproar, the hall was instantly in an uproar, and all gazes looked towards the 3D young ladies of the Qin clan. Of the 3 young ladies of the Shin family, Shin Qing was already engaged, leaving only Shin Yu and Shin Miao. Shen Yu was gentle and moving, and her talent had spread far and wide. Now that Shen Miao was a slender and elegant young female, her bearing also made others cast sidelong glances at her. The most important thing was that behind Shen Miao was Shen Xian, this great Buddha. And everyone could see clearly that the person that Prince Yu was looking at was Shen Miao. In a moment, everyone's gaze towards Shen Miao was extremely strange. There were those who rejoiced in her misfortune, and there were also those who pitied her. The previous Princess Yu's death was not clear, and everyone knew that there was something fishy about it. Everyone was well aware of what kind of demonic temperament this Prince Yu had. However, such a person was deeply protected by the royal family. On one side was the dignified General Wei Wu, and on the other side was the Emperor's brother who had saved his life. How should he choose? When Prince Yu of the first rank finished speaking, Shen Xian's face sunk and the veins on his forehead even popped out. The mighty general's reputation had never been undeserved. For a moment, there was a kind of ferocious hostility that overflowed, causing the expressions of the surrounding people to change. This official was a loyal official, but if he could not even protect his own daughter, even if he had to stake his life and meritorious services, Shen Xian would not fear going against Prince Yu. Shen Qiu also tightened his lips and stared fiercely at Prince Yu, as if as long as Prince Yu said Shen Xian's name, he would rush out and fight to the death with Prince Yu. As for Luo Shuiyan, she was already holding Shen Miao's hand tightly. Her carefree smile had long fallen and was replaced with a deep ruthlessness, as if she was a mother wolf protecting her cub and did not give in to the others' coercion. When the surrounding people saw the Shen family's behavior, they could not help but exclaim in their hearts. Now that Emperor Wen Hui was on the high seat and the Shen family made such a stance, there was a feeling of swords being drawn in the air. Emperor Wen Hui was overly suspicious, and the Shen family had no fear even though they were above the emperor's prestige. Were they not afraid of leaving a knot in Emperor Wen Hui's heart in the future? Prince Ding's eyes also moved slightly, and there was a trace of surprise in his eyes when he looked at Shen Miao. It seems that this fifth Shen young lady is indeed General Shen's treasure. Su Mingfeng whispered to Xie Jingxing, the Shen family can actually do this for her. Going against Prince Yu was equivalent to going against the imperial family. No matter what, the Shen family's actions at this moment had clearly expressed their unyielding attitude. One fear that even if Emperor Wen Hui issued a decree, the Shen family would not easily agree to it. Xie Jingxing smiled lazily and declined to comment. In the corner, Pei Lang tightened his grip on his teacup. What would the girl who shot an arrow at her classmate without blinking during the academy examination do? Emperor Wen Hui's smile was somewhat unfathomable, and the gaze that he looked at the Shen family was somewhat dark. He said, "Which young lady of the Shen family did royal younger brother fancy?" Everyone was waiting for Prince Yu's answer. A carefree smile floated on Shen Qing's face, but before that smile could rise higher, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his abdomen and could not help but cry out miserably as he clutched his abdomen and fell to the ground. What happened? Qing'er. Shen Qing's sudden action made everyone jump in shock. Ren Wanyun immediately hugged her, and Shen Qing's face quickly turned pale. Shen Yu pulled the corner of Chen Roqiu's clothes, and the latter's heart jumped. She did not know why, but she looked towards Shen Miao. But one saw the purple-clad young female sitting at the table, and her expression did not waver. When she met Chen Roqiu's gaze, she gently smiled and turned to look at Luo Shuiyan before asking worriedly, "What happened to eldest sister? Could it be that she was poisoned?" Chapter 181. Poisoned. When the words were said, the surroundings suddenly became chaotic. Shen Miao did not let it go and continued to look at Luo Shuiyan. Could it be that an assassin sneaked in? This time, not only the female guests, even the male guests, the few princes and Emperor Wen Hui's face changed. During the returning banquet, all the civil and military officials were present, and if an assassin sneaked in, the imperial family would be in danger. Immediately the guards outside all rushed in, and their hands were on the swords at their waists as they watched the surrounding movements like a tiger watching its prey. One was the possibility of an assassin sneaking in, and the other was Shen Qing, who was lying on the ground moaning in pain. As such, no one cared about Prince Yu's words about marrying a young lady from the Shen family. After all, compared to these rumors, one's life was more important. Su Mingfeng opened his mouth, and after a long while he whispered in admiration, "Good means." With just one sentence from Shen Miao, the focus of everyone's attention was shifted. The current chaos and tension made Prince Yu look like a fool. Xie Jingxing swept a glance at the young female who had a worried face and lightly snorted. Shen Miao's eyes slightly moved. After being with the Fu family for so many years, no one understood the Fu family's suspicions better than her. Shen Qing's appearance, with a slight mention of this moment, was enough to make Emperor Wen Hui, who had been assassinated numerous times, to become a bird that was startled by the mere twang of a bow. "Mother, it is better to find an imperial physician for eldest sister." Shen Miao said, "This cannot go on." Luo Shuayan then recovered to her senses and frowned as she looked at Ren Wanyun. Shen Qing was in such pain, but as a mother, Ren Wanyun did not think to find a physician for her daughter. She did not know how this mother was doing. Immediately, Luo Shuayan bowed to Emperor Wen Hui. "This official's wife earnestly requests your majesty to summon an imperial physician to take a look at Qing'er's illness and solve the crisis." When the words were said, Shen Qing had not even spoken when Ren Wanyun screamed, "No!" Everyone's eyes landed on Ren Wanyun. When Ren Wanyun spoke, her heart knew that it was not good. Facing so many probing eyes, she forced a smile and gritted her teeth. "This official's wife. This official's wife is saying how can Qing'er trouble the imperial physician? Do not spoil everyone's mood. This official's wife will just bring Qing'er down." "What are you talking about?" Luo Shuayan said seriously, "Nothing is more important than one's life. Could it be that you as a mother feel that Qing'er's life is not as important as the banquet hall?" Everyone's expression was very strange. Looking at the current situation, it seemed that Ren Wanyun, who was the biological mother, was not willing to look for the imperial physician, and Luo Shuayan as the Shu was enthusiastically concerned about Shen Qing's life and death. At the male side of the banquet, Shen Gue stared at Ren Wanyun with a heavy expression. He could not wait for this mother and daughter pair to not have any relationship with him. If Emperor Wen Hui was unhappy because of this, what would happen to his future career? Eldest Shen Furen is right. It was the Empress who lightly spoke. She glanced at Ren Wanyun. "Eldest Shen young lady's injury is more important. The returning banquet is not as important as one's life." Ren Wanyun's heart panicked. If Shen Qing was seen by the physician, wouldn't the matter of the fetus in her womb be exposed in front of others? She said, "Nyang nyang," or, "I'm fine." Shen Qing's forehead was oozing big drops of sweat and her complexion was as pale as paper. It was obvious that she was in extreme pain. She clutched her stomach and was unable to speak, but she knew that she could not let the imperial physician come over, so she suppressed the pain and said, "Eldest sister, this is not only related to your safety but also the safety of everyone in the hall. If you were really poisoned, it means that an assassin had mixed in and everyone would be in danger. Even if you do not think for yourself, you should think for His Majesty." Shen Miao's calm voice sounded. Chapter 182. When she finished her words, Emperor Wen Hui's gaze became somewhat serious. Shen Qing almost vomited blood from Shen Miao's words. What else could Shen Qing say? Could it be that she dared not to think for the emperor? The few princes of the Fu family also heard Shen Miao's meaning. Prince Li paused for a moment before saying, "This young lady of the Shen family is born with a sharp mouth. Someone come." Without any hesitation, Emperor Wen Hui said, "Go and invite the imperial physician." Something happened to the young lady of the Shen family in the palace, so naturally Zhen must investigate clearly. Eldest sister must also not move. Shen Miao lightly said, "Perhaps the murderer is mixed in the crowd at this moment. When the imperial physician arrives, he will take eldest sister's pulse here, else one fear that there will be a problem if the blood flow is affected." Ren Wanyun did not have time to speak when Emperor Wen Hui nodded his head, correct. With a single sentence, he had sealed off all possibilities. To let the imperial physician examine Shen Qing in public meant that the matter of Shen Qing's pregnancy would be exposed in front of all the civil and military officials. Thinking of this, Ren Wanyun's body could not stop trembling and her fear finally spread to Shen Qing. Shen Qing endured the pain and her heart was filled with even more fear. Mother, don't, but what could Ren Wanyun do? Emperor Wen Hui had already spoken and she could not defy the decree. She was just a woman and naturally could act unreasonably in the inner courtyard, but in front of the emperor, empress and hundreds of officials, Ren Wanyun was at a loss. She raised her head and looked towards Shen Gui's direction, hoping that Shen Gui would help her, but when she met Shen Gui's eyes, there was only blame and anger. In a moment, Ren Wanyun's hands and feet turned cold and her heart was filled with despair. She did not even bother to comfort Shen Qing who was in her embrace and only slumped to the ground absent-mindedly. What is wrong with your Shen Qing? Feng Ning whispered to Shen Miao, why does she look like she is very afraid? Shen Miao smiled and Luo Shuayan also frowned. Ren Wanyun's abnormal behavior made her feel somewhat strange. But he could not think of any reason so he looked towards Chen Roqiu and Shen Yu at the side. Shen Yu was frightened by Shen Qing's appearance and was somewhat flustered as she grabbed onto Chen Roqiu's clothes. Chen Roqiu also stared at Ren Wanyun motionlessly. After being Ren Wanyun's sister-in-law for so many years, Chen Roqiu naturally knew that her second Sa had always been able to deal with all kinds of situations with ease. There could only be one reason for her to lose her composure today and that was that she had fallen into a trap. Shen Yu whispered, eldest sister would not really be poisoned. Mother, is it fifth younger sister, you, Chen Roqiu sternly stopped her and could not help but look at Shen Miao who was at the side. Separated by a few people, one could not see Shen Miao's gaze but seeing that the corner of her mouth seemed to be slightly raised, Chen Roqiu could not help but be shocked. Her intuition told her that today's matter was definitely related to Shen Miao, but was Shen Miao really so daring to poison the palace? But no matter what, Shen Qing's reputation could no longer be preserved. Prince Yu of the first rank's face also sunk because of the sudden change. Even though his actions were absurd, he was able to distinguish the priorities and this was definitely not a good time to mention the matter just now. A sarcastic smile floated on his lips. Today Shen Miao managed to escape a calamity and no matter if Shen Miao was the one who poisoned Shen Qing, Shen Miao's thoughts were too simple to be able to hold him back. Afterwards, he could still mention the matter to Emperor Wen Hui. There were some matters that one could not escape from. The imperial physician quickly rushed over. What was unexpected was that the imperial physicians in the palace were all elderly people. Because of their rich experience, they were able to enter the Imperial Physician Academy. However, the imperial physician who came was only in his early 20s. He was also very handsome, which made some of the young ladies from official families stare at him. Chapter 183. The moment Shen Miao saw this imperial physician, her heart thumped and she carefully sized up that imperial physician. The young imperial physician carried his medical box and after bowing to the emperor and empress, he walked over to Ren Wanyun's side. Ren Wanyun still wanted to block but heard the imperial physician say, "Will Furen please let go of young lady Shen so that this one can take young lady Shen's pulse." His voice was very pleasant to the ear and made one's heart feel comfortable. Under the watchful eyes of everyone and with the sharp eyes of the emperor and empress, no matter what Ren Wanyun did, she did not dare to go against him. Shen Qing had already fainted from the pain. She took a step back and watched as that imperial physician placed 2 fingers on Shen Qing's wrist. Just as Shen Miao was in a daze looking at that imperial physician, Feng Ning's joking voice was suddenly heard, "Could it be that you also fancy that imperial physician? If you fancy him, then it is not considered that your eyesight is bad." Shen Miao was slightly startled and asked, "You know him?" Feng Ning said in surprise, "This is the first time you are interested in the things that I am talking about." "Never mind." I will also be merciful and tell you that this imperial physician is a new physician in the imperial medical institution. His medical skills are amazing and even consort's heart pain was cured. His Majesty valued him and made an exception to let him enter the imperial medical institution. Now he is the youngest official in the imperial medical institution and is very good looking. So many young ladies like him. Shen Miao said, you also like him? How could I like him? Feng and Ning raised her neck, even though his medical skills are high and he is good looking, but at best he is just an imperial physician and does not have any family backing him. He is all alone in the world. How can such a person think of my family? Even you, although you like her, if you really want to match her, then you're still a bit lacking. Feng and Ning had been pampered by her family since she was young and firmly believed that her husband was an earth-shattering person. She really did not put a small imperial physician in her eyes. What is his name? Shen Miao asked. Could it be that you really like him? Feng and Ning looked suspiciously at Shen Miao before saying, called Gao Yang, but in the official families of the Ding capital, there is no one with the surname Gao. That was to say that this Gao Yang was definitely not from a big family. Shen Miao looked at the young imperial physician and even ignored Shen Qing and Ren Wanyun. There was some fluctuation in her heart because Shen Miao discovered that this Gao Yang actually gave her a familiar feeling, as if she had seen him somewhere before. However, she had never seen Gao Yang in the Imperial Academy of Medicine in her previous life. If it wasn't at the Imperial Academy of Medicine, where else could it be? While he was thinking, Gao Yang had already finished taking the pulse. When he turned back, he met Shen Miao's sizing gaze and was slightly startled, but he quickly recovered and cupped his hands towards Ren Wanyun. Imperial Physician Gao. The Empress opened her mouth. Is the young lady of the Shen family poisoned? Gao Yang looked at Shen Qing who had fainted and then looked at the pale Ren Wanyun before cupping his hands in greeting, replying to your ladyship's words, the young lady of the Shen family was not poisoned and only drank the clear lotus tea. After a pause, he continued, the clear lotus tea that young lady Shen drank was not poisoned and young lady Shen was also not poisoned. Oh. Emperor Wenhui looked at Shen Qing, since she was not poisoned, then how could it be like this? Replying to your majesty. Gao Yang sighed, the clear lotus tea is cold in nature and there is no harm for ordinary people to drink, but for a pregnant person to drink it, it would affect the fetus. The young lady of the Shen family is already pregnant. The young lady of the Shen family was already pregnant. When the words were said, there was an uproar in the surroundings. Shen Gui opened his mouth and his face turned purple in a moment. He suddenly looked at Ren Wanyun and the latter was paralyzed on the ground in a daze. Good. The one who spoke was that Wei family Furen. She suddenly stood up and did not care where she was and pointed at Ren Wanyun as she scolded, you are engaged to my Wei family and actually want my Wei family to marry a used shoe to raise a son for others. Ren Wanyun, do you still have any face? Chapter 184. The surrounding people became even more noisy because of Wei Furen's words. Some time ago the marriage between Shen Qing and the Wei family was spread in an uproar and today she was diagnosed to be pregnant in front of all the civil and military officials. What kind of logic was this? A virgin girl was actually pregnant. Was this an illicit affair? She even wanted to marry into the Wei family with her body. Since the ancient times, it was considered a great wonder in Ming Qi. Ren Wanyun still did not move. Her entire body seemed to have lost its strength and only half crawled to Shen Qing's side and held her in her arms. Shen Furen, Ben Gong also want to know what is going on. The Empress said coldly from the high seat. Even though Ming Qi was considered to be open-minded about the matters between men and women, but to get pregnant before marriage and have an illicit affair was a matter that would throw the family's face. Once it was discovered, one would be drowned. The Shen family was the head of the Ming Qi's official family and even though Shen Gui's official position was not as high as Shen Xian's, it was not considered low. The higher Shen Qing's status was, the worse the impact of this matter would be. The Empress was in charge of the 6 palaces and could not bear to see such dirty matters. Almost everyone could hear the coldness in her voice. Ren Wanyun only felt bitterness in her mouth and was unable to say a word. What could she say? Could she say that Shin Qing did not have an illicit affair but was raped? But no matter what, it was a fact that her innocence was ruined. As for Prince Yu of the first rank, she could not say a single word. Prince Yu of the first rank was a person who haggled over every penny, and if one were to bite him, one feared that there would be no good fruit to eat. If Shin Furen does not speak, then let young lady Shin speak. The Empress' eyes suddenly turned sharp as she instructed the palace maids beside her, go and wake young lady Shin up. Ben Gong has something to ask. Ren Wanyun was shocked, but the palace maids beside the Empress had already walked forward. Their actions were very fast and Ren Wanyun did not even have time to stop them before the 2 palace maids violently pinched Shin Qing awake. When Shin Qing woke up, her abdomen was still in pain, but she heard the Empress coldly asking from the high seat, Shin Qing, Ben Gong ask you, who is the father of the flesh and blood in your abdomen? When Shin Qing heard this, her body stiffened and she looked towards Ren Wanyun for help. In a moment of desperation, Ren Wanyun shook her head at Shin Qing and told her not to speak nonsense. As for the future, Ren Wanyun would think of a way to rescue her. When Shin Qing saw Ren Wanyun shaking her head, she did not understand her meaning but did not dare to speak carelessly, so she stammered, this official's daughter. This official's daughter. She could not say it no matter what. Shin Miao sighed softly and said, eldest sister, better say it out. Now that one has committed a serious crime, and since there is such an ending, one cannot let you bear the burden of this life alone. Ren Wanyun looked at Shin Miao fiercely and could not wait to tear Shin Miao's mouth apart. Shin Qing's body trembled and her eyes were filled with terror. The meaning of Shin Miao's words was that she would not be able to escape death. Between life and death, Shin Qing did not care about anything else and suddenly shouted, no. No. My child belongs to His Highness the Prince of first rank. The child in my belly is the flesh and blood of His Highness the Prince. Today it was really a wave rising before the first splash had even calmed down. A good returning banquet actually involved so many things. Prince Yu of the first rank. Everyone looked towards Prince Yu and the latter narrowed his eyes, but his expression was very gloomy when he looked at Shin Qing. Qing, do not talk nonsense. Ren Wanyun rushed over to cover Shin Qing's mouth, but words that were said were like water that was spilled out and could not be taken back. Shin Qing's eyes widened as she stared at Prince Yu. Her thinking was very simple. Since there was an illicit relationship with an outsider, premarital pregnancy was a necessary ending, but as long as the child in her belly was Prince Yu's flesh and blood, then it would be related to the imperial bloodline. In this way, it would be equivalent to having a life-saving talisman. In any case, the emperor would not order the execution of his own nephew. Shin Miao looked at Shin Qing and felt it was somewhat funny in her heart. She could roughly guess what Shin Qing was thinking in her heart, but she had forgotten that there was a trick in this world called, get rid of the mother but keep the child. In the inner palace, this trick was never tired of being used 100 times. Did Shin Qing really think that with that little bit of flesh and blood, she would be able to live safe and sound? It was just that she would die faster. Chapter 185. The Emperor and Empress's expression was uncertain. If Prince Yu was involved at this time, it would not be that simple. At the male side of the banquet, Shin Qiu and Shin Xian looked at each other. Shin Xian was still alright and was somewhat stunned by the matter, but Shin Qiu secretly clenched his fists. Previously Shin Miao did not dare to tell him who was the person who raped Shin Qing, but now everything was clear. No wonder Shin Miao was unwilling to say, it was Prince Yu of the first rank. Once he thought that if it was not for Shin Miao's good luck, the one who would end up in Shin Qing's situation would be his own younger sister. Shin Qiu's heart gave birth to a melancholy feeling. Prince Yu did not admit it but also did not deny it. As such, it could almost be confirmed. Everyone looked at Shin Qing with sympathy and pity. Prince Yu of the first rank had always liked to use various means to secretly abduct young females and even dared to touch the daughter of an official. Now the unlucky person was coincidentally Shen Qing. In the silence, Shen Miao's voice rang softly. No wonder His Highness the first rank proposed to marry the Shen family's young lady. So it was to give eldest sister a status. These words were light, but it made everyone present to be enlightened. No wonder it was like this. Just now Prince Yu of the first rank said that he wanted to marry a Wang Fei and was interested in the Shen family's young lady. So it was actually Shen Qing, and now there was even a child. In a moment, the gaze that looked at Shen Qing changed. As such, it did not seem that Prince Yu was forcing her, but Shen Qing was willing to be a Wang Fei. This fifth Shen young lady is very powerful. Su Mingfeng said in surprise. The ability to invert black and white is also extremely high. Most of the people were led by the nose, but it did not represent everyone. Those who were clear-minded could still remember that when Prince Yu of the first rank said that he wanted to marry the Shen family's young lady, he was looking at Shen Miao. Xie Jingxing crossed his arms and looked at the purple-clad young female opposite him with a smile that was not a smile. One did not know when it started, but everyone at the palace banquet was led by the nose by Shen Miao. Now that things had developed to this stage, it was all within her calculations. And it was not that there was no danger in this. She was bold enough to gamble and her moves were accurate. She took everyone's reactions into account and played a good move. Since it was so, he did not mind adding fuel to the fire. Immediately Xie Jingxing also said, "It is good to have affection and righteousness." The emperor's brows wrinkled imperceptibly. One had to know that even though Prince Yu of the first rank would mess around in the past, he would not bring these matters to the stage. No matter how it was in private, there would always be a way to solve it, but to place it in public, to punish this imperial younger brother. One was afraid that Prince Yu's heart would be filled with resentment and this matter would be forgotten. When the emperor shielded like this and followed the example of the subordinates, it would not be able to awe the officials. As for Shen Miao and Xie Jingxing's words, it was a very good idea. If it was said that these two people were in love with each other, there was nothing wrong with it. He looked at the Empress and the Empress understood and said, "So the young lady that royal brother mentioned was the young lady of the Shen family. But both of you are too reckless. But both of you are too reckless and causing such a big disaster. What would happen in the future?" Shen Qing's heart heaved a sigh of relief. Ignoring the pain in her abdomen, she crawled up and knelt on the ground to kowtow and pleaded, "It is all this official's daughter's fault, but this official's daughter cannot bear to part with the flesh and blood in her abdomen. I beseech your majesty and your ladyship to look at the child in this official's daughter's abdomen and spare this official's daughter this time." Booing sounds rang out. This time Shen Qing did not have any dignity at all and only lost her face. The Empress also looked at her with disgust but said lightly, "It is difficult to escape the blame. But since today is the returning banquet, it is a happy event and imperial younger brother has been a widower for so many years, so Ben Gong will do a good deed today. Giving the two of you a marriage bestowed upon you is also a golden marriage." Shen Qing managed to keep her life and quickly said with joy, "Thanking your majesty and thanking your ladyship." She did not know how shameful her actions were in the eyes of others. In the past Shen Qing only said that Shen Miao could not be seen in public, but now Shen Qing herself had become the daughter of the Shen family that could not be seen in public. Prince Yu of the first rank looked at Shen Qing darkly before his eyes turned and landed on Shen Miao. Sitting high up, the emperor stared at him with a warning stare and Prince Yu of the first rank could only cup his hands and slowly said, "Thanking imperial older brother and imperial Sa for fulfilling my wish." It was just that only the person involved knew the chill in those words. The corner of Shen Miao's lips rose as she looked at Prince Yu fearlessly. In that pair of clear eyes, there was a look of joy, but there was a trace of fierceness hidden in that joy, as if it was a ferocious beast. Today was only the opening dish and the real thing that was left for Prince Yu residence was still at the back. To clear all the plans that Prince Yu had planned in front of him, presumably at this moment Prince Yu's heart was already extremely furious. When one was angry, it was most easy to make mistakes, and this mistake was like the wrong moves on the chessboard. Taking advantage of the victory to pursue and destroy the pawns and chariots, one would be able to win very quickly. She tilted her head and her eyes were abnormally bright, but if one looked carefully at the smile on her lips, there was a kind of chilling terror. It has begun. Prince Yu of the first rank. Chapter 186. A proper homecoming banquet had ended in this sudden turn of events. Emperor Wen Hui's mood was disturbed, and not long after, he flicked his sleeves, and the Empress also said that she was tired. Since the Emperor and Empress had left, the officials naturally knew that they could not stay for long, and one after another found excuses to leave. Even though today's matter seemed to have found a perfect ending with the eldest young lady of the Shin family marrying into Prince Yu residence, but those with discerning eyes knew that it was a shocking scandal. As for that eldest young lady of the Shin family, once she marries into Prince Yu residence, it would naturally bode ill rather than well. Luo Shuiyan held Shin Miao's hands tightly. She did not know how Shin Qing and Prince Yu would have an affair, but because of this she was more worried about Shin Miao's safety. She only felt that the danger in the Ding capital was no less than the northwest desert. Shin Qiu did not say a word until he left. He had always been cheerful, and it made Shin Xian think that he was feeling sad because of Shin Qing's matter. But he did not know that Shin Qiu's heart was already extremely angry and felt that he had nowhere to vent his anger. He hated the Shin family's second household for being vicious and also hated Prince Yu's shamelessness. Shin Qing had long been brought away by Ren Wanyun in a hurry, but Shin Gui's expression was very interesting and everyone looked at him with meaningful eyes. Some colleagues who did not get along with him in court even threw stones at him when he was down. They cupped their hands and smiled. Congratulations to Shin Darren. To be able to become in-laws with His Highness Prince Yu is a great blessing. If it was in the past when Shin Qing married Prince Yu, it would not be a big deal to Shin Gui. As long as it could help his career, his daughter's happiness was not important. But now, Shin Qing's performance had obviously brought trouble to Prince Yu. Would Prince Yu vent his anger on him? As he thought about it, Shin Gui's heart gave birth to some irritation and fear. After the returning banquet dispersed, Luo Shuiyan and Shin Miao walked out of the palace, and when they passed by a corridor, Shin Miao softly reminded her, "Be careful. There is a loose brick here." Luo Shuiyan was a military general and her steps were big and heavy. If one step was taken, one might stumble. Luo Shuiyan took a careful look before smiling, almost fell. Then she was surprised and looked at Shin Miao. How did Jiao Jiao know? Shin Miao choked. She had lived in the palace for decades and had long remembered what it was like. When Luo Shuiyan asked, she could only reply, "1 year I tripped here, and since then I've remembered it." "I see." Luo Shuiyan laughed heartily. Jiao Jiao is quite smart. She remembers the places where she fell, so she won't fall again. Shin Miao's heart moved, but she did not speak. As the two of them walked, they saw two people who looked like guards dragging a young eunuch past. The young eunuch's mouth was stuffed with a handkerchief, and he seemed to be struggling with all his might. However, how could he struggle free from the tall and strong guards? Following behind them was the head eunuch, Eunuch Gao. "Shin Furen, Shin Young Miss." Eunuch Gao stopped and greeted them. "Eunuch Gao, this is..." Luo Shuiyan looked at the little eunuch and asked. "The newcomer doesn't know the rules and made a mistake. I'm taking him to be punished," Eunuch Gao said with a sharp voice. When that young eunuch saw Shin Miao, his eyes landed on Jing Zhe, who was behind Shin Miao, and suddenly struggled like crazy, as if he wanted to rush to Jing Zhe's side. "Be more honest." Eunuch Gao kicked the young eunuch's knee and the latter gave a muffled grunt before kneeling down. Eunuch Gao snorted from his nose, "Thing that does not know the immensity of heaven and earth. Almost offended a noble person." Luo Shuiyan frowned. She did not like these inhumane punishments in the palace, and this kind of scene would make her heart uncomfortable. She immediately said to Eunuch Gao, "Since that is the case, one will not disturb Eunuch Gao's work." Chapter 187. Gao Gonggang quickly responded with a smile. It was Shen Miao who suddenly opened her mouth and softly said, "Since one has committed a mistake, naturally one should be punished." Everyone looked at her strangely and the little eunuch's body trembled as he looked at Shen Miao with a trace of resentment. Shen Miao did not bother about it and pulled Luo Shuiyan to leave. Before leaving, she lightly said, "If one does not know the rules then one must be taught. The palace cannot be compared to the outside and today is different from the past." As Shen Miao and entourage's figures gradually went further away, Gao Gonggang said to the two guards, "What are you waiting for? Let's go." Xiao Lizi's heart was filled with unwillingness and his face was filled with fear. He did not know what he had done wrong. In the little garden of the returning banquet, Shen Miao's personal maid Jing Zhi gave him an ingot of silver and said to her that eldest Shen young lady was not feeling well and did not drink the wine prepared for the palace banquet. She only needed a cup of clear lotus tea and would have to trouble her to make an exception during the banquet. He felt that this matter was very simple and he could obtain an ingot of silver, so why not? Moreover, if he could please this young lady of the Shen family, perhaps there would be a benefactor in the future. But no matter how Xiao Lizi calculated, he did not expect that Shen Qing was actually pregnant and that clear lotus tea became the main culprit that triggered everything. It could be said that that cup of clear lotus tea caused a disaster and the source of this cup of tea, after investigating, was traced back to him. Xiao Lizi explained countless of times but no one believed his words and the silver that he received was the most common silver, not even the official silver. How would a noble young lady use this kind of common silver as a reward? No one believed his words and he was a wicked person. What was waiting for him? Outside, Shen Miao was quietly walking. She was clearer than anyone about what was waiting for Xiao Lizi. The palace was a place where it was easy to invert black and white. If one stood high, one would have the ability to turn black into white, and if one was originally very short, then one would be sorry as the white would become black. In the beginning when Fu Xiaoyi just ascended the throne, Xiao Lizi was Gao Gonggang's dog that came and went at his beck and call. It was she who pitied Xiao Lizi and was willing to give him face in the palace. Later, Xiao Lizi became eunuchly, and she became a deposed empress. This eunuch that she had personally promoted even personally sent her on her last journey, and gave her a piece of advice, today is different from the past. Now, she could be considered to have returned those words back to him. This life was different from the past. Now, she was the daughter of the first wife of a high and mighty official, while the other party was just a lowly speck of dust. She didn't even bother to waste too much energy on him. This was a clean and efficient way, which was very good. She and Luo Shuiyan walked in front but did not know that behind the winding corridors, there was someone looking at her back and sighing, "Does this young lady of the Shen family have enmity with that little eunuch?" For no reason at all, a life was lost. Beside him, Xie Jingxing sneered at him, "When did you become compassionate? A doctor should have the heart of a parent." Gao Yang waved his fan and suddenly thought of something. His expression became serious as he said, "The young lady of the Shen family is not simple. Just now in the hall, she looked at me for a long time. Could it be that she discovered my identity? Impossible. Then the way she looked at me was really scary." Gao Yang touched his chin and seriously thought for a while before speaking, "Could it be that she is pleased with me?" Xie Jingxing stared at him without any expression and spat out a word, "Scram. You are really not interesting." Gao Yang shook his head in regret, "Even though the important matter is pressing, but your temper is getting fiercer and fiercer. It is better to relax." Xie Jingxing looked far away and said, "Yu Shu is here." "What?" Gao Yang was surprised, "When?" Chapter 188. Yesterday. Gao Yang's expression gradually turned solemn. "Could it be that you want to, correct? Ding Capital, Shen Residence, Kai Yun Yuan." With a paw slap, a clear finger mark appeared on Shen Qing's face and her lips turned red. "Shen Gui, what are you doing?" Ren Wanyun shouted in a stern voice and protected Shinqing in her bosom while looking at Shingue with a fierce look in her eyes. What am I doing? Shingue's smile was sinister like a wolf. If it was not for the trace of sentiments, he would really want to kill the two people in front of him. He said, "What did you do today?" "What?" Ren Wanyun was not to be outdone. "Can this matter be blamed on Qing'er? You are Qing'er's father and you do not help your own daughter and still hit her. Shingue, you have no conscience." "Daughter?" Shingue laughed in anger. "Shingue do not have such a daughter. Shameless and flirt around. Also pregnant with a vile spawn. Really not even comparable to the prostitutes in the brothel." Shinqing's body trembled violently and her pair of eyes were somewhat blurry. When Ren Wanyun saw this, her heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. If Shingue had a trace of father-daughter relationship with Shinqing, he would not use such vicious words to talk about his own daughter. Ren Wanyun handed Shinqing over to Chun Tao and stood up with a sneer. "Shingue, touch your conscience and ask yourself, for Qing'er to be like this today, who is the one who harmed her? Is it me? It is Shin Miao, that little slut. Why do you not go and find trouble with Shin Miao? Oh, you are afraid. You are afraid that when eldest brother and eldest Saw return, you will not be able to touch that little slut. You are angry at Qing'er, but don't forget that you also had a part in the matter at Wulong Temple. Now you have to take good care of yourself and push everything to Qing'er and me. This old woman will not fall for your tricks. If you provoke me, I will tell the matter to eldest brother and eldest Saw and none of us will be able to gain anything. You." Shingue had been husband and wife with Ren Wanyun for many years but had never seen Ren Wanyun acting like a shrew. What made him feel uneasy was that Ren Wanyun actually used this matter to threaten him. Even though Shingue was a slick person, he was extremely timid and this could be seen from how he did not dare to provoke Prince Yu. Now that Shin Xian and wife had returned to the residence, he dared not find trouble with Shin Miao. If Ren Wanyun really dared to divulge this matter, Shingue believed that Shin Xian would chop him in half. Thinking of this, Shingue said angrily, "You shrew, you are so unreasonable. Even if I told you, I wouldn't be able to explain myself. I'm leaving." With that, he fled. Looking at the back view of Shingue leaving in a hurry, Ren Wanyun's face was filled with ridicule. She knew her husband the best. Shingue was a person who bullied the weak and feared the strong. Marrying such a person, now she could not even protect her daughter. There was no doubt that Shin Miao had given Ren Wanyun a fatal blow. To Ren Wanyun, it was more painful to see her own daughter step by step towards destruction than to kill her. At this point, with the Empress bestowing marriage, no matter how capable Ren Wanyun was, she would not be able to change anything. "Shin Miao, this debt, Ren Wanyun will not settle it with you and swear that I am not a human." She gritted her teeth until her lips bled. In the western courtyard, after Shin Xian and wife returned to their own room, Shin Qiu was still sitting there without moving. He had a wooden face as he sat in front of Shin Miao's table like a door god. This young general usually looked like a spring breeze, but once his face turned black, there was a bloody smell of a man on the battlefield. Bai Lu and Shuang Jiang were somewhat afraid and did not dare to go forward. "Eldest brother." Shin Miao sent Shin Xian and wife back to the room and sat opposite him. "Younger sister, I have thought and thought." Shin Qiu said, "This matter cannot be let go like this. My heart is feeling stifled." The matter that he was talking about was the matter between Shin Qing and Prince Yu. Even though Shin Miao had concealed a part of it previously, but after the returning banquet, Shin Qiu could more or less guess the ins and outs of the matter. It was because he knew that this matter was done in a vicious and absurd manner that Shin Qiu was so angry. The youngest younger sister in their family was actually schemed against in this year and almost lost her life. If something really happened, Shin Qiu dared not imagine how much regret they would have. Chapter 189. Shen Miao looked at him and Shen Qiu was still speaking, the more I think the angrier I get. Younger sister, do not stop me. Even if I have to risk this life, I will not let them have it easy. Eldest brother. Shen Miao sighed, I have already said that there is no evidence for this matter. Since they are doing things, naturally there would not be a single drop of water leaking out. Moreover, this involves Prince Yu of the first rank, and against Prince Yu, the imperial family would give protection. If you were to jump out, you would be standing on the opposite side of the imperial family. Do you want to kill father and mother? Shen Qiu was surprised for a moment. Shen Miao's words were too rational and made him ignore the disrespect and disdain in Shen Miao's tone towards the imperial family of Mingqi. He knew that what Shen Miao said was not wrong. In the beginning, there were many noble families that were defiled by Prince Yu, and those families did not have a reputation higher than the Shen family, but at the end they were all raised high and lowered low. Behind Prince Yu's residence was the highest power in Mingqi, and to clash with it was like hitting a stone with an egg. But he still felt very depressed in his heart. He asked, we can't just let it go like this. Eldest brother, play a game with me. Shen Miao said. What time is it? Shen Qiu scratched his head. Besides, I thought you didn't like to play chess. Shen Miao did not continue his words and set up the chessboard. She picked up the black pieces and gave the white pieces to Shen Qiu, 2 armies against each other, this is your troops and this is my troops. Using the pieces as pawns, the generals and commanders will be divided, how about we fight for the world? Shen Qiu had always been passionate about the battlefield, and when he heard this, he became interested and said, all right. Even though he was a military general, he was proficient in chess. This was because there were many similarities between playing chess and fighting a war. An exquisite chess game could sometimes reveal countless tactics. The white and black pieces fell on the chessboard, creating deep ditches. The black and white looked like a real battlefield. Shen Miao's chess moves were slow. It did not mean that her movements were slow, but it was very gentle. It was different from Shen Qiu's sonorous moves and had a kind of gentleness. This kind of feeling made Shen Qiu feel as if he was being ground by a blunt knife. No matter how Shen Qiu's white pieces threatened her, she remained motionless and maintained her own rhythm, placing the black pieces unhurriedly. Although it looked like she was at a disadvantage, the number of black pieces in her hand was not one less. Occasionally, when Shen Qiu was about to devour her black pieces, she would slyly escape. After the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, all the white and black pieces on the table were still there. No one had gained the upper hand, and no one had taken a single piece from the other. It was just that one could clearly see that it had always been Shen Qiu's white pieces that held the initiative, and the black pieces were forced to a corner by the white pieces. If this continued, Shen Qiu would have to speed up his pace and he would be able to nibble away Shen Miao's white pieces one by one. Shen Qiu said, younger sister, your method of escaping is quite good, but don't tell me you want to spend the night with me like this. I'm going to attack. Just nice, Shen Miao smiled slightly, I also intend to do the same. Before she finished speaking, the black piece in her hand suddenly fell to a tricky position. Shen Qiu's brows furrowed tightly. Just that one position seemed to change the situation of the entire game. He was surprised in his heart. Previously the white pieces were pressuring step by step, but now it was like a cocoon of one's own making. He was trapped in Shen Miao's single black piece that reversed the overall situation and was unable to make a move. Following that, Shen Miao changed her previous style of only attacking and not defending, and her moves were swift and fierce. She swept away Shen Qiu's white pieces in big mouthfuls, and in less than a quarter of an hour, Shen Qiu's previously full of white pieces was only left with one. I have lost. Shen Qiu laughed bitterly and looked at Shen Miao in amazement. Younger sister, when did your chess skills improve to such an extent? Using the chess game as a battlefield, he, a military general, was completely defeated by his own younger sister. It was simply a big joke if it was set out. But his heart was also very surprised. What Shin Miao displayed was not the control of the pieces, but the understanding of the overall situation. From the previous weak style to the final swift and fierce moves, her expression was calm. Perhaps how this game of chess would move was all within her grasp. Chapter 190. I do not want to play chess with eldest brother. Shin Miao shook her head and said, previously eldest brother asked me if we will just forget about it and play a game of chess. What does eldest brother think? Shin Qiu was surprised for a moment and then jumped in shock. The black pieces were gentle at the start and only attacked without defending, but at the end it suddenly turned around and reversed the entire situation and swallowed the opponent clean. The meaning was that Shin Miao was gentle towards Shin Qing's matter and did not resist. It was not because she planned to forget about it, but she was waiting for an opportunity, waiting for those people to deal with Shin Miao to fall into a trap of their own making, and then she would make a move and return with a full load. There are many ways to achieve one's goal. Under the light, the young female's fingers were holding a black piece. The white fingers and the black piece formed a sharp contrast, and there was a strange kind of beauty. Her voice was light. If this road does not work, then change to another road. If it is not possible to do it openly, then do it secretly. They have already blocked their own way out. Next, it is our turn to play chess. Looking at the beauty under the light, the beauty was like jade. Shin Miao could only be called a delicate and pretty beauty, but at this moment, even Shin Qiu could not help but look sideways. The young female's posture was quiet, but it seemed to contain a huge amount of energy. An exquisite heart had long hidden the chess game in her heart, and everyone had become a chess piece. Shin Qiu felt bitter in his heart. He had always felt that even though Shin Miao was not close to him, her temperament was extremely simple and one fear that she would be used by outsiders. But now he could see clearly that his younger sister had unknowingly grown up, and this kind of scheming was something that even he could not compare to. Younger sister, I do not understand. She said. If eldest brother believes in me, then leave the matter to me. Shin Miao said, Prince Yu of the first rank, this kind of person would definitely find trouble with the Shin residents in the future because of this matter. We don't need this kind of enemy. Younger sister just said that Prince Yu of the first rank has the backing of the imperial family, so I cannot directly find trouble. What will younger sister do? Shin Qiu said worriedly. I have said earlier that if the white road does not work, then take the black road. There are thousands of roads in the world, and there will always be one that works. Shin Miao lightly said, Prince Yu of the first rank relies on the imperial family to bully others and is just a turtle with a shell. Remove his shell and see how arrogant he can be. Under Shin Qiu's dumbstruck gaze, Shin Miao smiled gently at him, but eldest brother, I need some money, so. Those things that His Majesty bestowed, give it to me with real gold and silver, I have use for it. Shin Qiu originally wanted to ask what Shin Miao wanted to do, but he did not know why. When he met Shin Miao's bright eyes, he could not say anything. He was the dignified Deputy General Shen and would occasionally argue with Shin Xian till his neck turned red, but as long as Shin Miao looked at him quietly, Shin Qiu felt that he would listen to everything unconditionally. Shin Qiu secretly spat at himself in his heart. He was not afraid of the enemy's generals, but afraid of a little girl. After living for so long, one would encounter all sorts of things. Big brother. Shin Qiu regained his senses and said, all right, I will get someone to send some over. Many thanks to eldest brother. Shin Miao nodded her head, the sky is late, eldest brother should also go and rest. All right. There is no need to worry about the matter of Prince Yu residence. Do not tell father and mother, I will see to it. All right. Shin Qiu scratched his head and left. When he was out of Shin Miao's room, he suddenly slapped his forehead and frowned. Damn it. There was really a feeling of being protected by one's own younger sister. In the room, Guyu carefully asked, young lady, is it really necessary to use so much money tomorrow? Shin Miao's gaze froze. Guyu had not seen her own young lady with such a serious expression for a long time. Chapter 191. She sighed and said, I'm afraid I can't take it down. On the second day, Shen Qiu really picked a few chests of real gold and silver and came to Shen Miao's courtyard. Most likely he was afraid that Shen Miao was short of money, so he took out 1,000 taels of banknotes from his bosom and gave it to Shen Miao before smiling. Younger sister's current age would require a lot of money, and one fear that this amount of monthly money is not enough. Take these silvers. If there's anything you want to buy, just buy it. If it's not enough, just ask Big Brother for more. The maids sweeping the floor outside all looked at Shen Miao with envy. In the past, they felt that this fifth young lady of their family had an awkward position in the residence. She only had a good reputation and did not even know that she was being bullied. It was really pitiful. Now it seemed that they were blind. Not to mention Shen Xian and wife, even Shen Qiu would pamper his younger sister to the skies. Shen Miao felt somewhat inexplicable as Shen Qiu's attitude was strange. She nodded her head and did not decline as she accepted the banknote. Many thanks. Shen Qiu was a little disappointed. After thinking for a while, he waved his hand and the two guards behind him immediately came forward. Shen Qiu said, My two guards are experts in the army. I will temporarily lend them to protect you. He was worried that Prince Yu of the first rank would have some tricks up his sleeves. If it was not for Shen Miao's insistence to go out, Shen Qiu would have let Shen Miao stay in the residence. Shen Miao complied and Mo Qing also followed out. Shen Qiu smiled, Your choice of bodyguard is really not bad. Mo Qing had already left the identity of a guard outside the Shen residence and Shen Miao told his identity to Shen Qiu. Shen Qiu returned the indenture to Mo Qing and let Mo Qing join the Shen family's army, but these days he would be Shen Miao's guard and protect her safety. Bringing along 3 guards and 2 maids, Shen Miao finally left the main entrance of the Shen residence. Even the carriage driver was someone that Shen Qiu found who had martial arts skills. Shen Qiu's servant said, Young master is really protective of young lady. Shen Qiu sighed. It was a pity that no matter how much he tried to protect her, she was too mature as a younger sister and did not have the sense of accomplishment as an older brother. Let's go. He waved his hand. Let's go back and practice our swordsmanship. Feng Xian pawn shop was the biggest pawn shop in the Ding capital. Compared to other pawn shops, this pawn shop naturally had its own advantages. The Feng Xian pawn shop only accepted precious items. If it was an ordinary item, it would be courteously sent out by the pawn shop assistant. The owner of the pawn shop was probably a generous person. If the item that the customer offered was really valuable, then the pawn shop would definitely offer a high price. But the Feng Xian pawn shop still had a rule, this place only did dead pawns. Once something was pawned, there was absolutely no reason to redeem it. However, people wouldn't pawn their precious things unless they were at the end of their rope, let alone pawn them at the cost of their lives. Thus, even though the Feng Xian pawn shop was rich and overbearing and it occupied the largest area in the Ding capital, there were only a few customers coming and going. Under such circumstances, this Feng Xian pawn shop actually maintained for many years and did not collapse. One did not know how they maintained their livelihood. Today, in front of this Feng Xian pawn shop, there was a horse carriage stopped. Some of the commoners who were passing by could not help but look over. Because those who came to Feng Xian pawn shop to pawn items, most of them were desperate and were in urgent need of money, and this carriage looked rather exquisite. The coachman sitting on the carriage also did not look like an ordinary person and did not look like a poor person. And why would a rich person come here to pawn their precious things? It was indeed somewhat strange. The pawn shop's worker was a young gray-clad boy who looked smart and capable. When he saw that the horse carriage stopped in front of the door, he was slightly surprised for a moment. Following that, a few females walked out from the inside. The leading young female was most likely a young lady from a family. She was wearing a cloak and had delicate features. When she looked over, her eyes were as clear as water. A few guards and maids surrounded that young female as they walked over. The little worker went up and smiled, Customer wants to pawn something. There is something that needs to be pawned. That purple-clad young female said. What item does this customer want to pawn? Can you take a look at the goods first? The little worker smiled from ear to ear. He could see that this young female was either rich or noble, so his smile became more enthusiastic. Who knew that the other party shook her head? I want to see your manager here. This is against the rules, customer. The little worker shook his head. He had seen a lot of people who came here to find trouble, and there was no lack of rich and powerful people, but the Feng Xian pawn shop had never been afraid of these people. The thing that I want to pawn is too big, and you look down on it. The young female was not angry and said lightly. When that pair of eyes looked at him, the little worker had a feeling that he had fallen into an ice cellar. Before he could speak, he heard a coquettish voice, Who wants to see me? A young female walked out from the back. This female was not considered beautiful, but her entire body exuded a charm that could captivate one's soul. The few guards behind Shin Miao all blushed. This customer, do you want to see me? That female swayed her waist as she walked over and asked with a smile. Shin Miao shook her head, I want to see your manager, Bai Xiao Sheng. The female's smile stiffened in a split second. Chapter 192. Bai Xiao Sheng was not a person but an industry. In one's life, there were thousands of positions. There was the imperial palace and also the common people of Jianghu. 36 professions and 72 professions. There was such a type of people who belonged to the 3 religions and 9 schools. It did not sound respectable, but there were many ways and uses. At times, the little bit of relationship between the imperial court and Jianghu was maintained by these people from the 3 religions and 9 schools. And Bai Xiao Sheng was one of these industries. As the name implied, Bai Xiao Sheng was somewhat similar to a detective. In hundreds of years of inheritance, this industry did not appear many times and ordinary people would not have heard of it. As for where it was and what kind of people it was, no one knew. But not knowing did not mean that it did not exist. This Feng Xian pawn shop in the Ding capital was the current Bai Xiao Sheng of Mingqi. That red-clad female's gaze gradually became solemn as she looked at Shin Miao, which made Mo Qing and the rest feel somewhat inexplicable. Even though they were in the army and had been in Jianghu, they really did not know what kind of thing Bai Xiao Sheng was. Naturally, no matter if it was Feng Xian pawn shop or Bai Xiao Sheng, ordinary people would not know that the people who came here were all prepared. Young lady is. The red-clad female asked tentatively. I am here to make a transaction. Hearing that, the red-clad female's expression slightly moved and under the stunned gaze of the shop assistant, she smiled and said to Shin Miao, this young lady's things must be expensive. Since that is the case, please follow me to the back for a discussion. Mo Qing and the rest also wanted to follow but were stopped by the red-clad female, these few people need not. Young lady. Jing Zhe was somewhat worried. If Shin Miao were to go in alone, perhaps she would meet with an accident. You all stay. Shin Miao said, I will return after this transaction is done. After Shin Miao and the red-clad female left, Mo Qing and the rest stayed in the outer hall. One of the guards that Shin Qiu gave to Shin Miao asked Mo Qing, Brother Mo, what is young lady doing here? After all he had killed and seen blood, he naturally had some intuition towards danger. That red-clad female's expression and the conversation between Shin Miao and Shin Miao made the few of them feel that this matter was not simple. I also do not know. Mo Qing smiled bitterly and shook his head. Looking at the corridor that led inside, he said, Young lady knows what to do. The red-clothed woman led Shin Miao through a very long corridor. At the end of the corridor was a square wooden pavilion. It had a total of 6 floors, and the top was covered with a veil. It was impossible to see what was inside, but it seemed to be very well maintained. At the very least, the wood used to make the pillars was the invaluable evening fragrant wood. There were rumors from outsiders that the Feng Xian pawnshop's head was extremely wealthy, else the pawnshop business could only barely be maintained for so many years. After all, to buy such a large piece of land in the most prosperous area of the Ding capital, but to be unable to make ends meet, it was not something that everyone could afford. But Shen Miao knew that the reason why the Feng Xian pawnshop was so rich and overbearing, was naturally because the way they earned money was not through pawning things. What they did was a business that had no capital, and naturally it was profitable with little capital. The red-clothed female welcomed her to the lowest floor of the pavilion and found a room for her to sit down. It was a tea room, and the mahogany tables and chairs in the tea room were engraved with landscape paintings. The carvings were lifelike, and with one look, one would know that the craftsman's craftsmanship was exquisite, and of course the value was not cheap. "I am called Hong Ling," the female smiled. When she smiled, the corners of her eyes were so charming that water could drip out, as if the amorous feelings were carved into her bones. She asked, "How should young lady be addressed?" "My surname is Shen," Shen Miao said. When Shen Miao was sizing up the other party, Hong Ling was also sizing up Shen Miao. She was secretly surprised in her heart. Initially she thought that it was some rich young lady that came to the Feng Xian pawnshop to create trouble, but who knew that she actually heard "by Xiao Sheng" from the other party's mouth. Knowing that this was most likely an expert, she welcomed her inside. But Hong Ling had been doing business in the Feng Xian pawnshop for so many years, but it was the first time that she met such a young customer. She was not sure how much the other party knew and feared that it was her first time doing business, so she was thinking if she should brush it off. Chapter 193. So it is Shen young lady. Hong Ling smiled. "One do not know if Shen young lady came to our Feng Xian pawnshop to buy or sell." Shen Miao said, "Buy and also sell." Buying and selling at the same time, Hong Ling could not help but be surprised. It seemed that it was the first time that the few green-clad girls who were serving Hong Ling saw Hong Ling lose her composure and quietly glanced at Shen Miao. Putting away the shock in her heart, Hong Ling continued to smile. "One do not know how much is the value of this transaction that Shen young lady is doing." Shen Miao shook her head. Hong Ling did not understand her meaning. "Shen young lady," Shen Miao's voice was very calm, "just now I have already said that the business that I want to do is too big. He cannot see it and you also cannot see it. If you want to talk, then look for your master." Hong Ling's throat was somewhat hoarse. For so many years, she had been good at dancing, but because the people who came here to do business all knew what Bai Xiao Sheng's line of work was, they were polite and courteous to her. This was the first time that she was greeted so rudely. For a moment she instinctively wanted to get angry, but when she raised her head and met with Shen Miao's gaze, she was slightly surprised. The young female opposite did not look old and had a pair of eyes that were as clear as water, but when she looked at people, there seemed to be a little bit of coldness that burst out. That calm and quiet appearance had an inexplicable majesty. Hong Ling felt that the other party's gaze towards her did not have a trace of fear but was simply looking down from above. Hong Ling's heart quivered and that little bit of anger disappeared in an instant. There were so many people coming and going doing business, and she was considered to be able to see people accurately. This young lady's imposing manner was a little shocking. She did not know where it came from, but it made her feel somewhat fearful. "Shen young lady, I am the person in charge here. If there is a transaction to be done, naturally it will be done with me," she said. Even though she felt that Shen Miao's identity was not an ordinary person, Hong Ling was not one to be frightened, and the smile on her face became even more gorgeous. "No matter how much money there is, it is not like I have not seen it before. It has nothing to do with money." Shen Miao smiled gently. "I have said before that you cannot make the decision for this transaction." She looked around. "I came with sincerity, but you all have no sincerity. Bai Xiao Sheng is only SOSO. Hong Ling had never met such an impolite person before. Immediately, the smile on her face became colder as she said, "I feel that Miss Shen does not seem to be sincere in doing business. Since Miss Shen does not believe me, there is nothing I can do. Shen Miao stared at her for a long while before saying, as such, I will first sell you a piece of news. Hong Ling paused, only to hear the girl in front of her say calmly, back then, the Qin sisters in Yuzhou of Jiangnan went missing. How about I sell this news to you? If you think the value of this information is good, please let the shopkeeper meet me, and then we can discuss the information. Hong Ling's body shook as she looked at her in shock. After a moment, she straightened her expression and said, May I trouble young lady Shen to wait for a moment, Hong Ling will withdraw first. Hong Ling hurriedly left, leaving behind a few green-clothed girls in the tea room looking at her curiously. Clearly, they did not know why Hong Ling would suddenly leave after hearing her words. Shen Miao looked at the teacup in her hands. The tea was made from Jun Shan silver needles, and when it entered her mouth, the fragrance of the tea was rich. Coupled with the faint incense in the tea room, it made one feel relaxed and happy. Obviously the owner of this place knew how to enjoy life. Bai Xiaoxing's business was in the pugilistic world's news. In the pugilistic world's news, it was divided into buying and selling news. There would be people who wanted to buy news, and there would be people who wanted to sell news. When the buyer and the seller met up, the business would be done. Bai Xiaoxing's business was like the intersection point of the beacons on the battlefield. What they did was to bring the buyer and the seller together. Chapter 194. And the news that Shen Miao wanted to sell was an unsolved case that caused a sensation in Ningqi. The wealthiest Qin family in Jiangnanzhou province had two beauties that could topple a city. With this kind of appearance, if they were to enter the palace, they would definitely be able to fight for a position as a concubine. Not to mention that the world's beauties were painted with skin, they were all white bones. True beauties were like the most exquisite jade, and one more glance was blasphemy. The Qin family was a big family, and it was not a good thing to have these two daughters. If a female's appearance was too outstanding and there was no ability to match their looks, one feared that it would bring disaster to the family. Fortunately, the Qin family was not only the wealthiest in Jiangnan, but also had a place in the pugilistic world. The Qin family had a wide network and had many friends in the underworld. The master of the Qin family was indebted to a sect head, thus the Qin family had a backing. Who knew that even so, when the Qin sisters were 16 years old, on the day of the Lantern Festival, they disappeared under everyone's eyes. The Qin family searched for a long time without any results. It had been 3 years since the Qin sisters disappeared. The Qin family had been spending manpower and financial resources to search for the two daughters. Even though they knew that the odds were against them, they had never given up. They even found Bai Xiaoxing and spent a lot of money to buy news. However, there was no news at all. Now that this business that had been in existence for 3 years suddenly had someone to sell, how could Hong Ling not be surprised? The remuneration that the Qin family paid was definitely not cheap. As long as Bai Xiaoxing could complete this business, even if it was divided, he would be able to get a lot of money. Business people speak according to money. Shen Miao did not believe that she could not find the master behind it. The pavilion in the Feng Xian pawn shop was called Linjiang Xian pawn shop, and the place to do business was on the first level. From the second to the 6th level, it was used by the head of the family. At this moment in the tea room on the 6th level, there were 3 people sitting at the table. Yu Shu, why did you arrive so quickly? Gao Yang frowned as he looked at the person opposite, did not even greet. Opposite him sat a 17 to 18 years old youth. This youth was very cute and was different from Xia Jingxing's burning hot sun-like handsomeness, and also different from Gao Yang's gentleness like water. This youth was like a neighbor's boy and had an inexplicable affinity. He was wearing a lake green robe and his smile was rather pleasing, heard that there is a change in the Ding capital's plan and knew that both of you would definitely need a capable general like me to help, so I specially came back to help. Hee hee. Gao Yang replied with a sneer. Ah, thank you, third brother. The youth called Yushu suddenly turned towards him and said, Yi Chui Lu's young lady Xiao Yao has recently been indifferent to me and is deeply frightened. Third older brother has always been liked by young lady, why not teach me? This seemingly friendly and harmless young man was actually a veteran in the field of flowers. Xie Jingxing did not even look at him and said, look at the appearance. Ah, could it be that third brother thinks that I'm not handsome? The youth was so angry that his face turned red. Back then, I was also a flower, pursued by tens of thousands of people. Could it be that third brother is jealous of me? Gao Yang could not take it anymore and pulled Ji Yushu's head to the other side. Ji Yushu, if you continue to speak like this then go back. Cool. Yushu immediately sat up straight and said seriously, third older brother, let us talk about the plan for this trip. He had not finished speaking when he saw a red-clad female coming up from downstairs. She had a charming appearance but did not come in and called out from afar through the curtains, family head. Hong Ling, Yushu guided patiently, told you many times that even though you are good-looking, it is better not to come up when us brothers are talking. Even though I dote on you, one cannot not know when to advance or retreat. He was born young and tender as if he did not know the ways of the world, but the words he spoke was like a wily old fox. It was fortunate that Hong Ling was his subordinate, as if it was a normal young female that heard a few words from him, one fear that their face would turn red from embarrassment.